Chapter 391. Wanting more Godforge pieces. Will you be able to get more switches if your diva is fully revealed? Yuna asked. I think so. Virion said that my abilities will get stronger every time that I increase my cultivation in body formation. He answered. It may not even be limited to switches. Maybe I can make something more complicated next time. Master, I can't wait until you can get more switches. That way, we can use it to spy on more people. Fudge said, jumping on top of his head. It's decided. Let's get more Godforge pieces for Bro Mike. Zion rallied. I seem to remember that there are also other magnetics in FlareCorp. Fudge said with an evil smile. Shall we invade them tonight? I'll pass on that, Jaka said, yawning and immediately laying down on the ground. However, Grieve stepped up. Ho ho ho. An invasion, you say? That brings back old memories? Oh wait, I don't have a brain. Michael looked at the three of them and nodded. I won't say no to that, he said to them. The four boys hopped in excitement, dancing in a circle chanting Godforge pieces. Godforge pieces. Like little kids. Yuna quickly cleared her throat and stopped the celebrations. Ahem. We haven't even cleaned up this fight and you're already planning on another one, Yuna said, massaging her temples. Aren't you worried about yourself? She took out her white handkerchief and began to wipe the burn marks on Michael's cheeks with a frown on her face. He tried to move away from her, embarrassed, but Yuna glared at him and grabbed him by his collar. I'm fine, he said, hiding the blush on his cheeks. Sit still, you rascal. Meanwhile, Lilia watched on from behind a tree with an elated smile on her face. Hey, it's working, she whispered to herself. Invading FlareCorp. I did like the prospect of eating the fear emotions of those FlareCorp soldiers, Vivi said, buzzing around with a hungry look on her face. Lord Michael, I have to advise you that it is not the optimal time for you to invade FlareCorp. We still have to settle our business here in this forest and consolidate all of our new territory. Give me 3 more days and we can start an all-out war against them, Shiina said. Yuna looked at Shiina and Vivi, betrayed. You too. Michael and the boys continued their celebrations, dancing in a circle and chanting, 3 more days. 3 more days. Vivi was with them, taking her place in the circle and buzzing around. Eventually, Jaku also ended up joining in after finding out he can rest for 3 days. Meanwhile, Omisu finally got the courage to speak up. What about the results of the competition? Even though she was quiet as she said that, her words seemed to echo through the forest and turned everything into a standstill. Vivi quickly buzzed away from Michael and the boys, going over to Yuna and the girls. That's right. How could I have forgotten? Zion said with a smug look on his face. Well then, do you like to admit your loss now? Shiina smugly looked back at Zion. What are you talking about? We won. Michael and the boys looked at each other for a few seconds, and eventually broke out into laughter. What's so funny? Yuna asked Michael, crossing her arms. We're the ones who defeated the most enemies, he replied to her. And to prove my point, I'll let Naruto and Sasuke tally the points. The 2 orc chieftains emerged from the ground out of their shadow form. Bu-Tutu. I am honored to say that the boys' team scored a total of 942 points. You have triumphed, boss. Michael looked over at Yuna and gave her a confident shrug. But before the boys' team could celebrate, Yuna raised her hand. Wait, Sasuke, please tell us the real scoring of points. In terms of how many bandits each team defeated, who is the team that won? Sasuke smiled, strumming his quills, and said, Ra-ta-ta. In terms of bandit scores, the girls' team has won with the score of 721 against the boys' team of 689. Michael shook his head. Wait a minute. We clearly defeated the most enemies. We almost single-handedly defeated all the FlareCorp soldiers. Yuna adorably wagged her finger at him. That's not the rules of the game. We clearly stated in this contract that whoever defeated the most bandits won the game. Soldiers do not count. Shiina, Umisu, Lilia, and Vivi all hugged Yuna for her smart moves. She instructed them to just focus on bandits, not the Flare Corps soldiers. Because of that, despite the boys' team defeating more enemies, it was the girls who won. "I'll finally have help in managing the company," Shiina said, pointing at her two brothers. "That can't be." Zion became as pale as snow. "No, I can't do more chores. I need sleep," Jaku despaired. "Ho ho ho, I don't remember signing a contract," Grieve argued. "You did, Sir Grieve," Shiina said, pointing to his skeleton hand mark on the page. "Instead of chores, you'll be studying under a teacher to fix your amnesia." Grieve's jaw dropped, literally. Meanwhile, Michael fell to his knees. "No! For 1 week you will do all that we want," Yuna teased him. "That's right. It'll be like old times. Isn't it, honey? Don't you remember how good it was when we lived under one roof? Why don't we do that again?" Lilia said, clapping her hands in excitement. Despite getting an ability that could change the very reality of the world, Michael felt even more powerless than before. After everything was finished, everyone returned home to their headquarters in Angora City. After such a long day, they all deserved to rest. The Dragonborns went home, with Shiina already barking orders at the two boys. And as part of the agreement, Michael had to personally transport Yuna and his mother to their rooms. Lilia would have wanted Michael to sleep in the same bed as her, but he quickly dodged that bullet by saying that he had a lot of things to do. Technically, he wasn't lying. There were a lot of things to settle in the aftermath of the battle. Now that the bastard bandits were disbanded, the Reborn company practically had complete control over this entire forest. The only thing left for him to do was to return to Virion and transfer her out of this place and into the nation of Reborn, where the rest of the fairies were currently staying. And once Vivi heard that he was visiting their village, she insisted on coming with him. Soon, they both transported themselves to the fairy's pocket dimension. Vivi used her innate skill to get inside, while Michael used his magic. They quickly went over to the village and met up with Virion, who had been packing her belongings in a mushroom case. "You're back. How was it?" she asked Michael. "Mom, that's the first thing you say? You didn't even greet me first," Vivi complained. "Oh, you're always going off on your own. But this is the first time that I have met and seen a natural magnetic. So, tell me, Michael, how was your ability?" Chapter 392. Consolidating Wins. "You can turn things on and off? Everything. That's amazing." Virion clapped in amazement after Michael told her all about his switch ability. "I think it has something to do with applying technology to the world," he added. Very fitting," Vivi commented. "Anyway, I just want to thank you for choosing to believe in me. If it weren't for Virion, he wouldn't have even known about magnetics and Diva. He also wouldn't have been able to awaken his ability if they hadn't given him their precious Godforge piece. Because of that, their pocket dimension was slowly starting to become unstable. He saw cracks on the dark skyline, with the real world slowly peeking out. Vivi too. "Thanks." The supposed pixie queen blushed and turned her head away from Michael. If you're really thankful, then you better start working on that roller coaster. We're starving for fear. Meanwhile, you already got your payment. The Godforge piece." Michael tilted his head left and right. Not really. Virion's the one who gave it to me." Vivi turned to Michael with her hands on her hips. "I'm the pixie queen. Every decision by fairies all come from me. If I didn't want to, then she wouldn't have given it to you." Michael waved her off. "Yeah, sure," he said sarcastically. "I am the pixie queen," she asserted. He ignored her and walked over to Virion. "Do you need any help with your things? I can transport your mushroom houses if you like, but I'm sure that my engineers can build you a new one in the parched lands." "What are you talking about?" Vivi buzzed towards Michael. "We're taking all of this." Vivi fluttered her wings, releasing golden dust spores to the ground. Eventually, Michael suddenly saw the entire village of mushrooms start to glimmer with the same golden glitter. A large amount of mana rushed out of Vivi, encompassing the entire pocket dimension itself. Michael's eyes widened as he realized that the mana power Vivi used was equivalent to a 9-star spell. She was in the same class as Grieve. Vivi saw Michael's expression and smiled in content. "Believe me now?" she asked him. "I'll take everything we have here and put it all inside me." Michael saw the air start to fill with golden dust. Then, they started to crowd over towards the weird plants in the forest. The luminescent trees, the tentacle grass, and the mushroom houses. It wasn't just that, it was all the animal life too. The two-headed owls, the flying rats, and the mushroom king as well. Everything was being covered with the golden dust that spawned from Vivi's pinkish opaque wings. Michael then saw the mana in Vivi's body spike up, and suddenly, everything that was covered in golden dust disappeared. They seemed to be sucked up towards Vivi's wings, collected as the golden dust that created its texture. The pocket dimension was completely empty now. It was just a dark, empty space with nothing around it. "Michael, what are you doing?" Vivi asked, floating in the endless void of space with Virion right next to her. "Come and transport us to the nation of Reborn." He floated in the empty pocket dimension, still bewildered by the fact that Vivi was the real, bona fide pixie queen. After a few minutes, he used his shadow skill to transport them all to the parched lands. Michael, Vivi, and Virion arrived right in the middle of the plaza, with Lolo conveniently arriving to welcome their arrival. "Welcome back, boss." The yellow Hobmonkey mayor looked a bit haggard than normal. "I have done my best to contain the fairies, boss, but they have been quite the troublemakers." He patted his shoulder and consoled him. "Don't worry, Virion will take it from here." Lolo then led Michael and the two fairies towards a newly constructed district for the fairies. It was located in the middle of the Lamia River and the Satyr Forest. Since fairies were small, it was easy to squeeze them into a new space. "It's just an empty plot of land because our engineers have no idea about the fairies' habitat. Shall I get them for you?" Lolo asked. "No need," Vivi answered, and just like before, she fluttered her wings and released all the golden dust that was stored inside it. As soon as these spores touched the ground, they immediately transformed into luminescent trees, weird animals, and even the mushroom village of the fairies. The entire ecosystem of their pocket dimension was copy and pasted into the new fairy district in Reborn. "Home sweet home," Vivi said. This was great news for the fairies, but bad news for Lolo. Having these new animals and trees posed a problem for his management of the whole nation. For now, Michael let Lolo deal with the mess. Virion also took charge and beckoned for all the fairies to go home to their new village. At least now, Lolo wouldn't have to worry about them. As for what he would do, Michael decided to go back to the Queen's region and continue with the expansion of Reborn. "Michael, don't forget about our roller coaster. Okay?" Vivi said, waving her hand goodbye. Michael nodded as he transported himself back to the East Forest. Now that he had all of this space in his hands, he saw a lot of potential for building a new base or small town in this place. The reason why people haven't developed this land for their own benefit was because of the bandits and the fairies. Those two worked together to scare anyone away from settling inside. But now it was just a regular forest waiting to be developed. The very first thing was, of course, resources. He immediately told Shiina to contact Priya so that she could create another mining project in this forest. The ores they would get from this forest would solve their current lack of resources. For now, though, Michael contacted the construction workers and let them know that they could start the Golden Road again. The next day, Michael visited McTony's and saw that the line inside the restaurant was already reaching towards the outside. The restaurant continued to grow more and more, especially with the implementation of the takeout order. He walked inside, pushing himself through the crowd, and went over towards the kitchen. As soon as he opened the door, he felt the heat of the stove waft over his face. 3 more chickens, Tony shouted to his staff. "Plucking the chickens now," Remy answered. "Putting the sauce now, chef." And surprisingly, even Chef Gustiu was here cooking McTony's chicken. The dark-skinned chef even looked happy as he worked under Tony. The rest of his chef entourage ended up being relegated to folding takeout boxes. "Michael, you're here." Everyone greeted him as soon as they saw him. He then turned to Chef Gustiu. I didn't think you'd be working here. I was just here to visit. But I wanted to get my hands working and immerse myself in this, as you say, fast food business. It's the best way for me to adapt to this style of cooking, Gustiu replied. Michael nodded. Well, that's good. I'm just here to tell you that we have acquired a new location, the East Forest. I think it'll be good for your restaurant to be placed there. Chef Gustiu and his other chefs became elated when they heard this. Their original plan to expand their restaurant was in the East Forest. What can I do to repay you? Chef Gustiu asked. Well, there is one thing. Chapter 393, Building the Roller Coaster. Michael whispered to Chef Gustiu about his request. Oh, that's easy, the dark-skinned chef replied. I'll set it up whenever you want. Great, Michael replied. As for what this request was, he preferred it to be a secret. After all, it involved his mother. And he knew that Fudge, the ultimate snoop, could end up finding out about his request and spilling the beans to his mother. Those two were quite close and often schemed together, so it could very well happen. So for now, he kept his mouth shut and returned to Angora City. Once he arrived in the capital city, he immediately noticed a lot of change within the underground systems. The sewers and the indoor plumbing project was finally on its way. Since Angora City was unofficially part of the nation of Reborn, Michael wanted to modernize the city to become just like their nation. Looks like Castell and Chiina are already hard at work, he muttered to himself. Even though they had just finished defeating Blazel and the bastard bandits yesterday, they had already consolidated their winnings from the fight. Although the bandits lived in a cave, that didn't mean that they were poor. Rebornians raided the cave yesterday and found a lot of loot from their treasury, which they mostly gathered from robbing and pillaging travelers. Thankfully now, those loots were being appropriated to help the projects of Reborn, which in turn helps the common people. So it all worked out in the end. The resources they found were just enough for the sewer and plumbing project of Angora City. So now all they had to do was create it. Michael floated in the skies and looked down, occasionally seeing people in orange prison jumpsuits working in the sewer construction. This was another boon of the fight. Once the bandits were transferred over to the prison, the rehabilitation system quickly made them realize their mistakes. Those that wanted to repent their sins ended up working construction projects for Reborn, which helped a lot since most of them were in the 4-star realm. He eventually reached the Reborn headquarters, which was now located beside their department store. As he entered, he saw a lot of busy Rebornians working in their desks and sipping coffee. Lord Michael, you came just right in time. Chiina greeted him with a stack of paperworks. These are all the permits for the railroad system for Angora City. It's our next project after the sewer and plumbing system. He gave it a quick glance before using magic to sign them all. Castell, he called out to the CEO maid. We still have enough resources for this, right? Yes, young master. The restaurants that have reserved their place in the truck stop have given us enough resources as their fee. He spent the rest of the hour with Chiina and Castell, who briefed him with all the current happenings of Reborn. Consisted of boring stuff like graphs, stat reports, yada yada. Eventually, their meeting came to an end. Chiina, his secretary, then told him about his next meeting. Lord Michael, your 1 p.m. meeting is with the engineers. They would like me to tell you that they have finalized a design. Michael thanked her and immediately teleported to their warehouse where the engineers were currently working on the roller coaster. There, he saw Kong and the other engineers looking over a blueprint. Boss, this is it, Kong said. We call this the Extreme Canine Rapids. It's designed for canine demi-humans, but is also effective for other humans or demi-humans. Michael looked over the blueprint and saw that a lot of the features were implemented from their experiments with the bandits just a few days back. The ride consisted of near 90-degree falls, steep climbs, twisting turns, and most importantly, electric shocks. This was not one for the faint of heart. Did you do one that's normal? More vanilla. Kong nodded, taking out another blueprint in the chest. He rolled it out to the table, showing a much more tame version of the roller coaster, similar to that of roller coasters back in his previous life. Both of these are good, he said to them. One is for extreme enthusiasts, and one is for normal people wanting to experience a little bit of thrill. Kong and the engineers high-fived each other, celebrating their successful planning. Coordinate with the construction workers. You know what to do. And on the very next day, Michael transported himself back to the parched lands to survey the land where they're going to build the roller coaster. "There is fine," he said to the construction worker, while pointing to an empty spot on the outskirts of the nation. He wanted the place to be big so that he could accommodate future additions to the roller coaster. It wasn't just roller coasters he was going to build, but all kinds of attractions as well. Right now, this was just an empty plot of land. However, Michael knew that this was going to be a theme park. Just a couple of minutes later, a bunch of trucks carrying heavy metal pillars rolled out to the desert. Kong also arrived and began to oversee the construction. He used his innate skill, projecting a life-size 3D blueprint of the roller coaster onto the plot of land, making it easier for the construction workers to place the foundation. "Oh, are you finally going to build it?" Vivi said, buzzing behind Michael. Yes, but you can't rush them. It'll probably take 2 weeks? 3 tops." Vivi seemed very disappointed to hear that. She put her head down, floating down chaotically like a drunk leaf. But then, she thought of something and immediately perked up. "Why don't we help?" she asked him. She didn't even wait for his response before she immediately flew over towards one of the large metal pillars laying on the ground. This specific type of metal weighed almost 1,000 kilograms, making it hard for construction workers to move around. Their individual spells and skills were not enough. It needed a combined magic strength of about 20 construction workers to move. However, as Vivi flew over this giant metal pillar, her iconic golden fairy dust sprinkled all over its surface. Soon enough, the entire thing started to float, almost weightless. The construction workers were amazed, thanking Vivi for helping them. They could hold it in one hand if they wanted. Vivi then quickly flew back to Michael with a proud look on her face. "Did you forget who we are? With us fairies around, carrying stuff like that is easy peasy. We'll help you, if you admit that I'm the Pixie Queen." "Ugh, fine, you're the Pixie Queen," he said dejectedly. Michael had to admit that their dust powers were pretty amazing. It would shorten the construction time of the roller coaster by a significant margin. It would also give the fairies a chance to contribute to the nation now that they were a part of it. So he asked for the fairies' help during construction. Just a couple of hours later, Vivi returned with the entire fairy village with her. They quickly worked in tandem with the construction workers, imbuing the heavy metals with their golden dust, making it very easy to handle. Chapter 394. Promoting the opening. Michael visited the construction of the roller coaster every single day. He was there, personally helping the construction workers install the foundation pillars into the ground, giving his blood, sweat, and tears for the project. Some would say that he was being a good leader of Reborn. Others, like his mother and the girls, would say that he was just escaping the punishment of their game. Who's to say which one was true? But in all honesty, he really did want to get his hands dirty this time around. After all the high-stakes fighting that happened with the bastard bandits and Blazel, he needed to just turn off his mind and work with his hands. It was also a good time for him to connect with the Rebornian construction workers who had been the backbone of progress in this nation. Without them, they wouldn't be able to expand their territory so fast in just 2 years, coming up on 3. And thanks to the new recruits, the reformed bastard bandits, there were a lot of new handymen ready to serve Reborn through backbreaking work. After being captured in prison, these bandits quickly adjusted to a life of becoming a Rebornian. Sleazy and Deathclaw led the charge, guiding bandits into the right path. Having the found of the bastard bandits personally gush about his dreams of becoming a real Rebornian really helped the other bandits to accept their new identity. Because of that, the Centaur police didn't have much of a problem taking so many bandits in the prison. Those that exhibited good behavior were given the chance to work as a construction worker for Reborn in exchange for a reduced sentence. It would be such a waste to have perfectly healthy 4-star realm bandits sitting in prison doing nothing. Their talents could be used to help lessen the burden of Reborn. That was why so many of the construction workers working alongside him in the roller coaster wore orange jumpsuits. I'm so excited, Vivi said, kicking her feet in the air. The roller coaster is almost finished. They both looked on at the large mound of pillars in the ground. They formed a stable foundation for the railings on top that wound up and down, twisting and turning, to give an exhilarating experience for anyone that rode it. She and the other fairies were a big help in completing the construction in record time. The 2-week estimated time of completion was slashed down to just 1 week. Tomorrow would be their last day. It all went by so fast, he muttered. Though I wish it would be longer. Vivi punched his shoulder. You're only saying that because you won't have an excuse to avoid your punishment. Since this roller coaster was so important to Vivi and the other fairies, the girls' team all decided to let Michael delay his punishment for now until the construction was finished. Once it was over, he would be free game for Lilia and the others. Michael dreaded the day. Should I destroy this roller coaster and do it all over again, Sisyphus style? He muttered to himself, seriously tempted. On the next day, at the very zenith of noon, the construction workers welded the very last touches for the roller coaster. Then it was done. Yippee! Vivi cheered, with the other fairies shouting just beside her. It's not done yet, he said to her. We still need to do some tests to see if it's up to our safety standard. Who cares about that? Just open it up to the public, Vivi argued. Michael shook his head. It'll only take just 1 more day or a few hours at least. And besides, we have already scheduled the grand opening to be for tomorrow. Speaking of which, he wanted to check in on Castell and Shiina about that. So, he quickly transported himself to their headquarters in Angora City to meet with his secretary and his CEO. As he entered the meeting room, he saw Shiina, Castell, and Jimmy. How's the promotion going? He asked them. Young master. Jimmy has already made a very compelling first-page news article about our new roller coaster ride. Jimmy, the news correspondent for Reborn, quickly slammed down his copy of the article on the table. Don't worry, Michael. And take a look at what I wrote. Michael read the paper and nodded in satisfaction. The content of the article was both an advertisement and a challenge. Instead of writing a boring description of the roller coaster, Jimmy basically told the readers that they wouldn't be able to ride this attraction without passing out at the end. This was enough bait to lure out all the adventurous people out there to try and disprove what was written in the article. This is good, Jimmy. Publish this and send it out everywhere. Jimmy flashed a big smile on his face and saluted at Michael before rushing out of the room. Since this was the first attraction for the nation of Reborn, Michael didn't skimp on promoting the roller coaster and spent a lot of money for newspapers to print advertisements on the front page. Angora City, the Grafted Cluster, Neo-Orcus, and even the entirety of the King's region. They had been the target of campaigns inviting them all to visit the new attraction in the nation of Reborn. In every corner of every street, people could find posters of the roller coaster in the nation of Reborn. Lord Michael, our low shadows have been hearing a lot of chatter about wanting to go. However, their budget is tight and they find it hard to pay for the transportation alone, Shiina said. Here's what you do. Make a limited event on all Reborn taxis and train rides. 50% off on fares going to the nation of Reborn. Make sure that you also send out Rebornian tourist guides in every city. They'll be offering an all-expense-paid trip to the parched lands for an entire week, for a discounted price. Shiina and Castell both widened their eyes, amazed at Michael's ingenuity when it came to business. I shall make sure that this is done, Castell said, bowing. Oh, and since they'll be visiting the parched lands anyway, start a festival in our nation. This will also serve as our celebration for our victory in the East Forest. I know that it's late notice, but can you do it? He asked them. Shiina and Castell seemed offended that Michael would even ask. They quickly left the meeting room, with eyes of determination on their faces. They didn't deserve to be Michael's helpers if they couldn't cobble up a nationwide festival in 24 hours. After the meeting was over, Michael was left all alone in the room. He did feel a little bit guilty that he put all of the burden on them. Just a little bit. Of course, he did have a lazy bone in his body. Michael, dear? Are you there? It's been a while since you and Una talked. It's not good to leave a lady waiting like that, you know? Should I invite her over here? As Lilia opened the door, she saw that the room was completely empty. But the chair did topple over, as if someone was just there and had quickly left the room. Chapter 395, Grand Opening. Meanwhile, in the nightly court in Angora City, a few of the squires and knights in training visited the Reborn department store to stock up on their chocolate bars. This had been their routine for the past few months. Train, eat chocolate, sleep, and just as they were about to enter the store, their eyes were suddenly drawn over to the poster right next to the glass display near the entrance. One teenage squire walked up to the poster and read its contents. Warning: do not go if you have a weak heart. The other squires were immediately interested when they heard that. What's that? They asked him. It's this poster. It looks like this roller coaster is a terrifying experience that only people with a brave heart should ride. Let me see that, one of the teens said, walking over towards the poster. And once he read it, he couldn't help but tilt his head in confusion. Why would this be scary? There's no monster or anything. And it even says here that it's completely safe. So, why would people be scared? Yeah, I wouldn't be scared by that, one squire with glasses said confidently. His other friends laughed, not believing him. Bro, you're the one who blinks his eyes whenever a sword is about to hit you. You're not one to talk. Hee. I can't believe that the person with the weakest sword heart among us is acting like the bravest one here. The bespectacled teen pursed his lips, angry at his friend's teasing. I'm not scared, and I'll prove it. We'll all go to this roller coaster and see which one can last the longest. His friends laughed before nodding their heads. Deal. Meanwhile, in some other part of Angora City, a few people were having a conversation while staring at the poster on the wall. This roller coaster is in the parched lands? A gentleman said, surprised. I thought there was only a desolate desert out there. Another gentleman, his friend, quickly shook his head. Don't you know about the Reborn company? Of course I know them. Who doesn't? Well, their nation is located in the parched lands. I've never been there myself, but I have heard great things about it. They say that the stars land there in the night, the gentleman's friend said. They lowered the price on the taxi. Maybe I should go visit it with my family, said the gentleman. Great idea. I will do so as well. There were many such people like that in the Queen's region. Although they had heard about the Reborn company, the knowledge about the nation of Reborn wasn't all that spread out yet. After all, Michael hadn't really advertised their nation so publicly before. It was only now when he promoted the roller coaster did a lot of people finally know about their nation's existence. The fact that the advertisements for the roller coaster were so rampant in every part of the city made it hard for anyone not to know about it. Because of that, there were a lot of people who set out to the King's region to visit the nation of Reborn. The amount of people that took the Reborn taxis and buses was staggering. Almost half of the population in Angora City, the Grafted Cluster, and Neo-Orcus migrated out towards the parched lands. Once again, a lot of companies were in complete awe and amazement at the Reborn company's ingenious methods of business. This was the first time anyone had ever used such a widespread advertisement. They never knew how effective it was. Eventually, the next day finally came and the roller coaster could finally be opened to the public. Michael woke up early in the morning and transported himself to the parched lands. And as he floated in the air above the nation, he immediately saw the large amount of Reborn taxis coming in from the horizon. Every lane of the road was filled to the brim with automobiles waiting for their turn to enter the nation's gates. Lolo and the Rebornians were hard at work trying to accommodate the large influx of visitors. Thankfully, they had already prepared for this and quickly funneled all of the traffic onto a new parking spot for tourists. The amount of visitors today far exceeded the peak from before. The advertisement worked, he muttered to himself. And this was just the people from the King's region coming to visit. Those that came from the Queen's region would only come later in the day, which Michael expected the road to be even busier than it already was now. Some tourists went out and explored the nation first. They became astonished at everything. The electrical lights, the tall concrete buildings, the very demi-human districts, and even the giant baseball stadium. However, Some tourists were immediately drawn to the large structure out in the open desert just beside the nation. "Whoa! It's even bigger than the painting on the poster," one of Squires said, peering over the metal fences around the roller coaster. "It reaches up that high. It's touching the clouds. Maybe it is a little bit scary." Michael surveyed the visitors and noticed that most of them were strong in their own right. They all had 3-star realm cultivation or higher. These are adventurers, Michael guessed. It made sense why they would take up the challenge of the roller coaster. Seeing such a large line at the roller coaster entrances, Michael lowered himself to the ground and met up with Kong and the other engineers. They were all inside the control building right next to the roller coaster itself. Here, they could monitor the ride at all times and ensure that it was working properly. "Is it ready?" he asked them. "As ready as we'll ever be, boss," Kong replied, wiping his sweat. "I can't wait," Vivi said, looking over the glass window to peer at all the visitors waiting to get inside the ride. "I can taste their excitement from here. We can finally taste fear," the fairies beside Vivi cheered. Michael noticed that even Virion was here. "What? Even an old gal like me feels hungry at times," she said. Noticing Michael's judgmental look, Michael raised his hands, conceding. The fairies did deserve this reward after working so hard for an entire week. "Well then, what are we waiting for? Let's go and show these people the time of their lives." Michael pulled the lever on the machine, and suddenly, the entire roller coaster roared into life. The sign on the gates lit up in bright lights saying, "Extreme Canine Rapids." The crowd on the entrance wowed. Just then, Rebornian attendants moved to the gates and started taking fees for the entrance. They then took 10 of the first few people who arrived and showed them towards the loading area. Coincidentally, the ones who were lucky enough to be the first customers of the roller coaster was the group of 10 squires coming from the Queen's region. "Welcome to Extreme Canine Rapids. Please make sure that all your belongings are stored in lockers located to your left," said a perky dogfolk attendant to the customers. "Please follow me so that I can show you to your seats." Chapter 396. Thrilling but amazing. The roller coaster attendant assisted all 10 of the squires, putting on their seatbelt for them. "This looks like a Reborn taxi but without the roof," said one of the squires. "I don't need this seatbelt. I'll just hang on to this without problem," said the bespectacled teen. Once all of them were locked in place, the attendant left the loading bay and closed the entrance gates of the roller coaster. "Enjoy your ride," she shouted at them. The teens were still laughing and treating this ride as just a silly little experience. There was still excitement and innocence on their faces, with them having no idea about what was to come. TSSSHH. The sound of the roller coaster's hydraulic system booting up startled the squires. They thought they were in the presence of a huge monster bear. Then, the coaster train started to move, slowly climbing up the slopes until it reached a height where they could even see a bird's-eye view of the entire nation of Reborn. As the squires looked down, they realized how high they were from the ground. It was at this point that they stopped laughing. It was serious. Even with their enhanced physical skills, they would find it hard to escape unscathed from a fall this high. And finally, they reached the very apex of the roller coaster, giving them a brief moment of respite. But that didn't last long. As soon, they saw that the rail tracks immediately led down to a near 90-degree fall. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait. We're gonna fall. No way." Click, click, click. Then, the coaster car sped down at speeds they had never experienced before. Their hearts almost leapt up to their throats. "Oh! Mommy, save me! Kai-ah!" The teenage squires let out screams that would have been mistaken for a girl's voice. They clung onto their seatbelts as if their lives depended on it. Each cart could seat 2 people at a time, so the squires ended up hugging each other out of fear, thinking that this would be the last time they saw each other alive. The worst part was that they were directly going down to the ground as if they were going to crash. But at the very last second, the tracks twisted to the side, making them all pull to the opposite direction. The coaster then went on to perform multiple loops that disoriented them all. Their screams rang out through the roller coaster and even reached out onto the streets of Reborn. The people waiting for their turn at the gates of the roller coaster couldn't help but look on with worry at the speeding carts on the tracks. What's happening to them? Are they dying? I didn't know it would go that fast. After the carts exited the looped portion of the ride, the squires couldn't help but breathe heavily from exhaustion. They couldn't even tell left from right after what they experienced. Is it over yet? As it turned out, the answer was no. The carts eventually entered an underground tunnel that was completely pitch black, leaving the squires completely anxious about what was to come. At least before, they could anticipate the twists and the loops. But now, they couldn't even tell if they were going to crash into the ground or not. All they felt was the pull of gravity as the cart sped through the course. Just then, electricity buzzed. The squires felt the hairs on their arms stand up. It sounded like there was a huge thunderstorm inside this tunnel. A large electric arc zapped above them, almost hitting them in the head. This scared them witless. The power of that electricity was akin to a 4-star magic spell. Even they wouldn't be able to deal with that if it hit them. Aya! They all screamed, thinking they were about to die before eventually, the ride exited the tunnel and slowly came to a stop. The squires were still shouting to the top of their lungs at this point, thinking that the ride was still not over. It was only when their seatbelts popped out of its lock did they finally open their eyes. "Have you enjoyed the ride, sirs?" the attendant asked them. The attendants helped them all get out of the cart. If they didn't, the squires would have stumbled forward and lost their balance. They were led to the exit, where a bunch of the people waiting in line looked at them with curious gazes. "Excuse me, young man. How was it?" The squires looked back at the crowd, with their eyes completely sunken and their faces as pale as snow. "That was scary. I thought I would die. I want to throw up." One of the adventurers on the line was confused. "It's bad then." However, the squires shook their heads. "Even though I felt my heart in my throat, that is still the single most exciting thing that I have ever been in my entire life. I don't know if it makes me crazy, but I want to do that again." And to prove their point, the squires all went back up the line again, ready for another go-around at the roller coaster. Michael watched on as more and more people experienced the roller coaster. Each time, he could hear their screams echoing out to the nation and leading people to come over to this side and see what was going on. "It's a hit, boss," Kong celebrated. "It sure is," Michael replied. "Look at Vivi and the fairies. They're having a field day." Above the roller coaster ride were these blobs of light that were buzzing around the carts. These were the fairies who were getting ready for their meal. As each time the customers screamed, they swooped down and consumed every fear emotion they could harvest. "Tight, tight. This is the purest fear that I have ever tasted," Vivi screamed out like an addict. The fairies were so excited that the roller coaster ended up looking like it was filled with golden glitter. Each time they fluttered their wings and consumed emotion, they would release their gold dust in the air. Michael couldn't blame them. After all, as more and more people went on the roller coaster ride, the more people started to anticipate the thrill. Each person that rode in it screamed their lungs out. But still, at the end of the ride, they would pledge that it was the best experience they had ever felt. So, the mere sight of the roller coaster was creating fear from the customers, leading to more nourishment for the fairies. After seeing the success of the roller coaster, Michael had all the reborn prisoners be sent here to witness what was happening with their own eyes. The bastard bandits, who had worked on this project for a week straight, could now see the fruits of their labor. "This is because of your work," he said to them. The prisoners looked at the people crowding the roller coaster gates. Despite fearing the ride, there were smiles on their faces. "We did that?" asked one of the bandits. They never thought that something they made would make someone so happy, but it did. This experience was what truly made them believe in the Reborn system. Chapter 397, Helping Dad. The roller coaster became a big hit, so much so that it had gathered a bit of a reputation within the adventuring circles. "You're not really brave until you experience the roller coaster," they said. The ride had gathered a lot of extreme enthusiasts, warriors, adventurers, and just people who were seeking a new and thrilling experience. But of course, there were still people who weren't looking for a near-death experience. There were a lot of visitors and tourists who simply wanted to relax and enjoy their holiday. For them, Michael prepared a festival in the nation of Reborn. There were all sorts of food and drinks prepared in the plaza, ready for people to eat and enjoy. And thanks to Shiina and Castell's quick management, they were able to make a parade roll through the streets of Reborn, with live music playing and giving a magical joyous effect on anyone listening. Everyone was celebrating, both Rebornians and tourists alike. Of course, Michael was in the mood for celebrations as well. But first, he wanted to visit his father, Bart. It had been a long time since the two of them talked face to face. He used his shadow clone to transport himself directly to the recreated Vanderbilt mansion in the parched lands. The place was completely empty, desolate of any maids and butlers. Even they were having a day off and celebrating the festival. The only one around in the mansion was Bart, who was in his office balcony, looking over the nation of Reborn with a bottle of beer in his hands. "Dad, I'm home." Bart quickly turned around, his face brightening up as soon as he saw his dear old son. "Michael, my boy, it's been such a long time since you visited me." The two of them hugged, exchanging smiles. "Yeah, sorry, Dad. Been a bit busy with the expansion in the Queen's region." Bart nodded, pursing his lips. "I know, son. The Queen's region can be a tricky place to navigate through. But still, you were able to triumph in the end. You've already conquered the southern tip." Michael scratched his head, a bit embarrassed after being praised. "By the way, how's your mother?" "Same old. You know Mom. She's been setting me up with a good friend of mine," he replied, chuckling. Bart chuckled as well, but soon his smile faded. "She's been overbearing lately, hasn't she?" "That's my fault, son. She hasn't been answering any of my letters lately." Truthfully, Michael had already heard about this from Castell. Since Bart was working with Castell, she had noticed that he had not been himself lately. And as it turned out, the Vanderbilts were having marital problems. The two of them had lost their spark after Bart lost his company. And because of that, the two of them were slowly drifting apart as the days passed. Eventually, Lilia moved out of their house and went on a trip to the Queen's region to be with Michael. That was the reason why she was there, and he was back in the parched lands. After that, Bart quickly tried to get her back. He was sending her letters to no avail. "Dad, do you remember what you told me about your first date with Mom?" Bart smiled, reminiscing about the good times. "Yeah, I fell in love with her at first sight. I met her in a restaurant called the Pyramidic Cuisine. Sometimes, I wish I could turn back time so that I could go back and we could feel the spark we had for each other back then." Funny coincidence. Did you know that a chef from that restaurant visited Angora City? I tried to get a meeting with him and see if I could reserve a table at his restaurant, but it seems that I was not influential enough to get his attention. Michael smiled. "You don't have to worry, Dad. I got you. I talked with Chef Gustiu and he'll be cooking a meal for you, just like your first date with Mom." That was the favor he asked from Chef Gustiu. He wanted the chef to cook the same meal that Bart and Lilia had back during their first date. Bart immediately brightened up as he heard that. "Really, son? You were able to persuade someone like Chef Gustiu?" Michael scratched his nose. "Of course. Gustiu will be working with the Reborn company from now on, so this is just a small favor that I got from him." His father was overwhelmed with emotion that he couldn't help but shed a tear. Then he quickly hugged Michael again, tightening his squeeze. "Thank you, Michael. But we have a problem." Michael looked at him. "What?" "Your mom. She won't answer any of my letters, so she won't know about the invite. And she leaves every time I try to find her." Michael nodded. "Don't worry. I'll deal with her." Soon, the night fell and the entire nation of Reborn was lit up by festive lights. Strands of LED lights were strung up in each and every pole, making it seem as if the stars have truly descended into the nation. This was a very pretty sight for the people of the Queen's region. This was the first time they had ever witnessed something so otherworldly. Michael then went over to their headquarters in the nation, where the Dragonborns, the Shadow Orcs, and everyone else was celebrating. "My dear son, where have you been?" Lilia asked, immediately smothering Michael with her chest. Michael ducked away from her and escaped. Ahem. Since I've been avoiding you for the last week or so, I've decided to make it up to you. Tonight, I have something special for you, Mom. Lilia's eyes turned into glistening starlight. Really? How sweet of you. What is it? I don't want to ruin the surprise. I'll have to blindfold you, Mom. Thankfully, she didn't seem suspicious about any of that. She quickly ripped off one of her sleeves and tied it around her eyes, obscuring her vision. I'll hold your hand and fly you to your surprise, he said to her. Lilia seemed all the more elated as Michael grasped her hands. Together, the two of them flew through the air, high up in the skies. It took a couple of minutes, but eventually, they reached their destination. On the edge of a tall cliff, there was a fancy table with white tablecloths and red plates that had beautiful-looking food already served. There were romantic candle lights in the middle, and rose petals scattered around the ground. He slowly lowered his mom down and guided her to her seat. Ooh, is this a special meal? Lilia asked, sniffing the air. Yes, Mom. But you can only open your eyes at the count to 3. Oh. Lilia finished counting and slowly unraveled the blindfold on her eyes. Her vision slowly adjusted, seeing the romantic dinner in front of her. Michael? She asked, looking around but seeing no one around her. It was then that she noticed the fancy plates, the candelabra, and the exotic food in front of her. This all came from the pyramidic cuisine. Not only that, it was the same exact one when she met. Just then, she heard a voice behind her that interrupted her thoughts. Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice your beauty. Chapter 398. Dinner Date. Lilia turned around, only to see Bart in an old-timey dashing royal uniform. This immediately brought back memories for her. Memories when they first laid eyes on each other. And those words, "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice your beauty." Those were the first words he ever said to her. Now everything made sense for Lilia. The candlelit dinner, the uniform, the words of Bart was trying to recreate the moment when they first fell in love. Miss, do you mind if I take a seat? Bart asked, going to the opposite side of the table and looking forlornly at her. Lilia's cheeks blushed. But then, she remembered that she was mad at him. So she quickly turned her head and snubbed any of his attempts at conversation. I don't know you, she replied. That's why I'm introducing myself, Bart wittingly replied. I have a feeling that we'll end up together in the future. But Lilia still wouldn't even acknowledge his presence. Bart sighed. I know that I haven't been good to you this past year, but I can change. I can rekindle that spark we had together. Come on, please. Give us a second chance. Finally, Lilia looked at him and snatched the rose from his hands. This doesn't mean that I forgive you, Lilia harumphed. Yes, it's just a dinner date, Bart relented. Despite looking like it had failed, Bart knew from the look on Lilia's face that she was starting to forgive him. Isn't this pyramidic cuisine? She asked, looking at the expensive-looking full-course meal at their table. This was something that only people with high statuses could afford to eat. Yep, it's the same exact one we ate back then. We looked so out of place in the restaurant, people thought we were beggars. I do remember. You didn't tell anyone you were a Vanderbilt, and I was just recovering from an adventuring mission. We stood out like a sore thumb in front of the royals. Lilia and Bart chuckled as they reminisced about the good times they had in their youth. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cliff amidst a forest of trees, Michael and the others were spying on this romantic affair from these star-crossed lovers. Ah, that's so cute. Look, Michael. Una pointed at the table when Bart was trying to spoon-feed Lilia with a piece of steak. She seemed offended, but eventually ate from his spoon. Ho ho ho. It is indeed cute. Oh, how I wish I could implant my amnesia onto them so that they could start again as new lovers, Grieve said. Guys? I kind of feel uncomfortable watching my parents have a dinner date, Michael said to them. I'm bored too. Can we go now? Zion asked, slumping down on a tree's roots. I, for one, like the atmosphere in this place. It's quiet, Jaka mentioned. The romantic atmosphere of the dinner date was all thanks to none other than Chef Gustiu. As expected of a top-tier chef from a prestigious restaurant, he knew how to cook food that blended well with the gentle night atmosphere of the surroundings. Thanks for your help, Gustiu. The dark-skinned chef tipped his hat. It's no problem. Since you're helping me build my own fast food chain restaurant, this is the least I can do. Chef Gustiu and the other chefs with him were immediately enthralled with Reborn as soon as they saw their nation firsthand. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Yesterday, they toured the entire territory and could not believe how advanced they were compared to even the biggest metropolis in the Queen's region. They had even asked Michael if they could establish their new restaurants here in the nation. Michael accepted their offer and wanted to place their new establishment near the roller coaster. After all, restaurants and food stalls were a staple of roller coaster parks. Many would get hungry after that thrilling ride. By the way, I prepared 2 sets of food as a backup in case something went wrong during the date. But it looks like they won't need it. Chef Gusto looked over at the dinner table and saw that both Lilia and Bart were no longer eating. They were standing over the cliffside, with Bart behind Lilia and holding her close to him with his hands. They both looked over the horizon, seeing the starry skies in the night sky and the bright lights of the nation of Reborn on the ground. It was a beautiful sight. I still have some extra food here if you're hungry, Chef Gustiu said as he took the tall chef's hat on his head and reached down, pulling out 2 more full-course meals the same as the one that he served to Lilia and Bart. As soon as everyone saw this food, their stomachs immediately grumbled. Yum! I'm so hungry, Zion said, subconsciously raising his hand to take a bite out of the steak. Me too, Fudge said, salivating. A good ninja needs some food. But before the 2 rascals could put their grubby hands on the plates, Shiina quickly swatted their heads and twisted their ears. Stop it, both of you, she warned. I thought you guys wanted to get out of this place? Chef Gustiu made me remember that there is still some paperwork to fill out regarding their restaurants. Shiina held both of them in her hands and slowly dragged them deeper into the forest. Come on, your punishments are still active. You'll have to pull an all-nighter to complete those papers. Zion thrashed around, carving his nails on the tree as he tried not to get dragged away. And oh, not paperwork. I would rather train. You can't do this to me. I'm the slime god ninja, Fudge protested, but Shina's deadly grip on his slimy body prevented him from escaping. Seeing the 2 of them get dragged away, Jaku couldn't help but laugh. Kukuku. That was his mistake. Omisu, make sure he comes too, Shiina ordered. Omisu nodded seriously, before taking out her spear and waving it around. With each swing of her weapon, the air around her started to gather more and more, threatening to create a huge tornado that would sweep everything off its feet. Okay, I'll go. No need to go all out, Jaku conceded. Sometimes, he feared his little sister's destructive tendencies. Ho ho ho, I forgot. Nope, Shiina shouted, still dragging the 2. Sir Grieve, you're coming too. You have a lesson with your teacher. Correct. Grieve, in an attempt to avoid studying, suddenly lost all of the necrotic powers in his body. His bones stopped floating in the air, falling into the ground in a pile as if he was just a washed-up skeletal remains. Omisu quietly picked up each bone and followed Shiina back to the nation of Reborn. The only ones still left in the forest were Chef Gustiu, Shiina, and Michael. There was an awkward silence for a moment. Well, I gotta go too, Gustiu said, winking at Michael before scurrying off with the Dragonborns. Michael shook his head, muttering, Not you too. Yuna looked over at the perfectly placed meals on the wooden table and turned to Michael. I guess it's just the 2 of us. Should we eat? Chapter 399, Memorable Day. Michael gulped. I guess we should, he replied to her. Normally, eating with Yuna shouldn't be that big of a deal. After all, they normally ate together during lunch and sometimes even dinner at their headquarters back in Angora City. But this time, they're alone with each other. Zion wasn't here to liven up the place. Shiina wasn't here to arrange everything. Even Fudge wasn't here, who usually sat beside him and Yuna. Not only that, but the candlelit dinner and the atmospheric surroundings made this even more romantic than it should be. Michael would even mistake this for a date. This is good. Try it, Michael. Yuna didn't seem to have any problem with the awkwardness as she continued to eat the full-course meal. Michael eventually shook his head. This is just a normal dinner with friends, he said to himself. No need to overanalyze. Once he was in that mindset, he found it much easier to pick up the spoon and start eating. But just then, Yuna accidentally dropped one of her knives to the ground, just in front of Michael's feet. Since he was closer to it, Michael decided to be a gentleman and pick it up for her. But what he didn't expect was that she would also pick up the knife. As he reached for the knife, his hand bumped into hers, making him feel the warmth of her touch. Once Yuna got her knife back, they both returned to their seats. "Michael, are you all right?" she asked him. "Yeah, I'm cool," he replied, but she could plainly see that there was an obvious blush on his face. Yuna covered her mouth, giggling to herself. A slight blush also appeared on her cheeks as she stole glances at Michael. However, he didn't seem to notice this as he was too busy trying to act aloof and nonchalant at this dinner date. No, this is not a dinner date. It's just dinner. It's not even the slightest bit romantic. He thought to himself just as the rose petals from Bart and Lilia's table got swept up by the wind and slowly went over to their table. Okay, weird coincidence, but still, this is not romantic at all. It was in that moment that Michael felt a cool feeling in his hands. He looked down and saw a single speck of white powder that landed on the back of his hand. But upon closer inspection, he realized that this was not just a powder. It was snow. Both he and Yuna looked up at the same time, witnessing as numerous beautiful and unique snowflakes rained down from the night skies. Michael raised his hand, letting some of it fall onto his palms. And with his supreme talent, he knew without a doubt that this was snow. After all this time, the special clouds that he had planted in the skies had finally grown large enough to change the very climate of the desert. These special clouds that he got from the Dwarven Kingdom consumed smoke from the ground and transformed them into all kinds of manna. This meant that if it had grown large enough, these clouds could even bring rain or even snow in this desolate desert. And with their factories constantly billowing out smoke from production, it had finally grown large enough to produce snow. It was a miracle. "Snow in a desert?" Yuna said, smiling. "Is there anything you can't do?" Michael shook his head. "Okay, this is pretty romantic," he admitted. And it was at that moment that they suddenly heard a branch cracking to the side. Michael quickly turned around only for him to see his worst nightmare. "Oh my God! Look, Han. They're having a date too. It's a double date," Lilia said, wiping a tear in her eye. She looked up at the skies as if the goddess herself had finally intervened and made her dreams come true. "Our boy has grown up," Bart said, tapping Lilia's shoulders. Michael glared at him with a look of betrayal, as if saying, "Really? After all that I've done for you tonight? It's not what it looks like," he said to them to quickly solve the misunderstanding. "My boy here is quite the responsible man," Bart said, approaching Yuna. "He'll take care of you." "Oh, how wonderful. I hear church bells ringing. I knew that this would happen," Lilia said, clapping in happiness. "Mom, this is not a date, and we're still too young to even think about marriage." Yuna backed him up. "We're not together yet," she said. Lilia and Bart paused for a moment before turning around to have a quiet conversation with each other. She said, "Yet," Bart whispered. "Our son still has a chance. She clearly is interested too. He just doesn't have the courage. I tell you." Michael coughed. "Guys, we can hear you." But they didn't seem to care. They turned around and slowly backed away from Michael and Yuna. "Well then, we'll let you continue your friendly date," Bart said sarcastically. "Bye-bye." And before he could even catch up to them, Lilia suddenly manifested two giant vines in the ground that wrapped over them both and slowly lowered them down the cliff and back to the nation of Reborn. Michael sighed. Why can't they all just act normal? "Sorry about that," he apologized to Yuna. "It's okay. They're fun. Let's go back. I don't want to give them any more ammo." Since Yuna couldn't fly, Michael used the tablecloth from the table and summoned his diva. He took out the switch from his pocket and attached it to the cloth, making it freeze in place. Now, the tablecloth acted like a solid piece, which made it easier to use a flight spell on. He hopped on to the floating tablecloth and held his hand out for Yuna to grab. Yuna looked at the tablecloth and couldn't help but remember the iconic animated movie with a magic carpet. That was a pretty romantic movie as well. But from the look on Michael's face, he didn't seem to notice the similarities. "You coming?" Michael asked. "Yeah, Prince Ali," she replied with a hushed voice. "Did you say something?" Yuna chuckled. "It's nothing. I just said that the scenery looks pretty." Once they were both on board, Michael flew the magic carpet on the snowy skies, returning to the nation of Reborn. Yuna couldn't help but take a sneak peek at Michael, with his golden hair flowing from the wind. This is a very memorable first date, she thought to herself. On the very next day, the nation of Reborn was in a complete uproar as they walked out of their hotels, their inns, and their houses only to see a pile of snow in the streets. Both tourists and Rebornians alike rejoiced at this unexpected miracle. Who knew that they could play snowball fights in the middle of a desert? This seemed to symbolize what the Reborn Company could do. They could bring snow to the desert. They could bring life to a desolate place. The day that Reborn made snow in a desert would be something that they would remember forever. Chapter 400. Reborn's Unbelievable Expansion. Early in the morning, Michael met up with Shiina, Castell, and Jimmy at their large headquarters situated at the very center of the nation. "Lord Michael, I am pleased to report to you that the reception for the roller coaster and the festival has been exceptionally stellar. According to the low shadows patrolling the streets, there has been a lot of sentiment among the Queen's region tourists about wanting their quality of life here to be the same as in Angora City. I think that our renovation there will become even smoother than it was before because of this." Shiina presented Michael with all sorts of graphs and pie charts that depicted the steep rise of the Reborn brand name on the customers. "I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the appearance of snow last night was perfect. It will be a perfect headline for the newspapers," Jimmy said. Writing down some words on a piece of paper and presenting it to Michael, said, "Reborn makes snow. Parched lands. Desert no more. This will be an even better advertisement for people to go here. The best part is that we don't even have to pay the newspapers anything. They'll gladly print this story because of how unlikely it is. If snow in a desert still didn't make people go out of their homes and visit the nation of Reborn, then there was nothing that could have made them do so. I have also been approached by a lot of businesses and rich landowners from the Queen's region," said Castell. "The letters they sent me have filled up an entire room. After they have experienced the luxury that our nation could afford, they found out that they could no longer live without it. They want to have electricity, trains, and showers in their own homes when they go back. Young master, they have even offered to front the money, the resources, and the manpower so that you could hurry the construction and renovation of Angora City." Now that was a very welcome surprise. The problem he had before was that he didn't have enough materials to build all the renovations in Angora City at once. But now it seems that the problem was solved. All it took was them getting a taste of comfort, and they came pouring out all of their money and resources to Michael. "I estimate that we can now simultaneously build the electric lines, railway lines, and the plumbing system for Angora City and the grafted cluster." That was a very huge load off his shoulders. Michael felt like he could float right now. "Boss Michael," Jimmy said, looking up at him with a smile. "With all things considered, I think that we can finally upgrade our rankings in the Golden 500. Breaching the top 400 will be easy." Soon after that very pleasant meeting with Jimmy, Castell, and Shiina, Michael soon met with a dear old friend of his, Cerberus Augendor. As the old man entered the room, Michael noticed that somehow, the 8-star wizard with a great white beard looked even younger than when they last saw each other. The old man used to look like 100 years old. Now, his skin was very supple like that of a brisk 60-year-old. "What happened to you?" he asked Cerberus. "Oh, have you noticed? Spending my time in your nation has done me very well. I may have visited your hot springs once, twice a day to achieve this. Michael allowed Cerberus and the other mages from the magic tower to stay in the nation of Reborn to help the research about the mithril artifacts. But it seemed like the old man spent more time relaxing rather than researching. "It's been such a long time. Care to play a game?" he asked. "I thought you'd never ask." Cerberus smiled and waved his hand as a chessboard floated from behind him and towards the table in front of Michael. And just like old times, the two of them played using their wits and their intelligence. "By the way, Michael, I couldn't help but overhear how your renovation plans for Angora City and the grafted cluster," Cerberus said, pushing a pawn 1 square forward. "So, do you know what you've accomplished just now? You have now expanded your business to the entire southern tip of the Queen's region. And with the addition of the entirety of the King's region, this means that you now have full control over more than a quarter of the landmass of the entire royal continent." Michael made his move, developing his bishop piece on the board. "So?" he asked again, as if he didn't understand how impressive this was. "So? Don't you know that, in terms of territory in the Queen's region, you are probably up there with the conglomerates? And you did all of that without conquering a single territory. That's insane." Michael wasn't really surprised by that because he was actively not trying to conquer anything. "And also, have I told you how surprised I was when I saw those fairies running around the nation? Don't you know people used to consider them as just myths and legends? Now, you could see one anywhere you looked in the nation where there's strong emotions. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers that you have the fairies and the dwarves, who are famous for being secluded, as your allies. Are you going to keep on collecting these exotic demi-humans? Please tell me now so that I won't get surprised again." Michael once again had no answer for that. He didn't plan on doing that, but it happened anyway. It's not his fault that those kinds of demi-humans naturally flock to him. "Who?" Cerberus took a deep breath. "I need a glass of water after that." The tower master easily conjured up a glass of water in his hands and began drinking it without break. Michael chuckled to himself, knowing what was going to happen next. "Oh, and I forgot to tell you, but do you know something about divas?" As the power on his chest surged upwards, the empty space above Michael started to shimmer with light before a robotic, mechanical arm manifested into reality. Its internal lights disguised as veins glimmered, as if it was a computer starting to boot up. Cerberus' eyes widened as he saw the diva appear above Michael. And just like old times, Cerberus couldn't help it and ended up spitting out all the water that he just drank. PFFTTTTT. Just as the mist of water spread out into the air, Michael quickly threw one of his pre-made iron switches to the air and flicked it to the off position in his mind. And as soon as the switch made contact with the water, his ability surged and glowed a dim white light that encompassed the whole mist. The water droplets stopped in mid-air, frozen in time. Cerberus' eyes widened even more, unbelieving of what he was currently seeing. "You're a magnetic?" Cerberus shouted. Michael nodded, and as he expected, the tower master knew something about them. He had a feeling about it because Cerberus was a mystic master of the Guild of Arcana. They were the leaders of the whole organization, just like how the Heavenly Knights led the order. If there was someone who knew about magnetics, then it would be someone like Cerberus. Chapter 401, Mithril Relics Use. "You! How did you stop the water? Is that your ability?" Cerberus asked. "Kinda, yeah," Michael replied. His ability was far more complicated than it seemed, but since he had just awakened it, he hadn't really mastered it yet. So, for now, all he could do was summon the switch. Cerberus then looked at the robotic arm hovering above Michael. He could tell that Michael had already ascended to the second stage of body formation. "I didn't think you'd be a magnetic. Did your grandfather give it to you?" Michael shook his head. "No. I haven't even met or talked to him before. I stumbled upon it after defeating Christian Hammerstone." Cerberus found it quite lucky for Michael to obtain such a power without the help of the Vanderbilt family. But to be honest, he wasn't that surprised. Michael's talents always gave him a fate that would transcend the normal. He always thought that the Reborn company would do good in the business. But now that he obtained a diva for himself, then it may very well be possible for Michael to go all the way. "So I'm guessing that you already went to Metropolis? You should have told me. I'm friends with the healer there and they would have given you a discount. Not that you needed it anyway. Michael tilted his head.
Metropolis.
Cerberus chuckled. Yeah, Metropolis. You know, the large city that houses the nearest apothecary in the region? Did you not even know who put the God-forged piece in your heart? I don't know anything about that. I didn't get the surgery, Michael replied. The Tower Master chuckled for a few moments more before he turned to look at Michael again, who still had the same serious expression from before. You're serious? Cerberus knew that the only way for someone to become a magnetic was through a risky surgery to put the God-forged piece in the heart. And that surgery had to happen each time someone ascended the stage of body formation, which meant that Michael was supposed to have had 2 surgeries at this point since he was in the 2nd stage of body formation. Yeah, I don't need surgery because I'm a natural magnetic. This really sent Cerberus into shock. The old man just stared at Michael before shaking his head. I know I shouldn't be surprised, but still, a natural magnetic? Do you know that even magnetics are still considered a myth from the general public? And among magnetics, a natural magnetic is even more of a legend. Nobody even thinks they're real. Cerberus had known Michael long enough to know that normal common sense didn't work on the child. But it seemed that every aspect of magic, talent, power, or smarts, Michael seemed to have an edge over everybody. It was definitely unfair. That's how I got my first God-forged piece. Suddenly flew into my chest. And I guess I can also attract other God-forged pieces from magnetics. Now, this was another bombshell. If any other magnetics heard this, they would quake in their boots. Just the thought of someone ripping away their power would make anyone want to stay away from him. But of course, he knew that Michael wasn't the type of guy to heartlessly steal someone's God-forged piece unless they truly deserved it. That's why you haven't been to any apothecaries. By the way, apothecaries are the only ones that can perform magnetic surgery. They're the only ones with specialized power to make it safe enough to perform. That's why Sinclair's Elixirs is a top conglomerate in the world. This meant that they had a monopoly on the surgery. If they're the only ones who could do it, then they could charge as much as they wanted and people would still pay for it. After all, the prospect of becoming a magnetic was a very easy way to become powerful. Cerberus then walked over to the frozen mist in midair. He looked at the switch and recognized it. This is the one that controls the light in my room here, he said. I see. So your ability can apply technological concepts you created into the world. That is a very interesting ability with lots of potential. As expected of the Tower Master, he was able to easily decipher Michael's ability with ease. Michael first moved out of the way before flicking the switch back on, with the mist finally spraying just beside him. He picked up the switch and pocketed it, with his diva soon disappearing from the air. By the way, I have a question to ask. What's the deal with mithril relics and magnetics? Cerberus slapped his own forehead as if he had just remembered something. That's right. Unlike other magnetics, you have no trouble finding a suitable mithril relic for yourself, Cerberus thought. And it's not just a mithril relic with rust and broken pieces. It's a real mithril artifact. Do you know what a mithril relic does exactly? I heard that magnetics need it to focus their power and use abilities. Cerberus nodded. That's right. A magnetic needs a suitable mithril relic in order to manifest their diva and their abilities. Without it, they would find it hard to even maintain their diva for a few seconds. Unlike them, Michael could do it without problem, so he never really had a need for getting his own mithril artifact. Cerberus then looked at the switch in Michael's pockets. How many switches can you make currently? 3 max, Michael replied. That's because you don't have a mithril relic, Cerberus explained. If you had one, you'd be able to make as many switches as you wanted as long as you had the stamina to do it. Michael couldn't believe how simple it was. He thought that he had to ascend to the next stages of body formation in order to increase the amount he could make. But as it turned out, he just needed a mithril relic to do it. That must have been the reason why Blazel could make as many flame marks as she wanted, while he could only make 3 switches at once. So all I would need is to get a mithril relic? Michael reached down to his shadow on the ground and grabbed a rapier from his inventory. The rapier was colored bright orange, with the blade guard in the form of flames that jutted out to the sides. This was Blazel's rapier. So if I use this, then I can activate my ability as much as I want? I'm guessing that it's not yours? Nope. It's from Blazel, a magnetic from Flare Corp, he replied. Then no, you can't use it. There is a certain process that a magnetic has to do in order to transform their mithril relic into something that they could use. And that process will start to bind that weapon to the magnetic. So unless you repurpose that weapon, then it will be totally useless to you, and maybe even damage your cultivation. Michael remembered something that Virian said. Does it have something to do with that spirit of old thing? Some kind of oil? Cerberus nodded. Yes, though most people call it Su as a shorthand. Chapter 402. Go further north. Magnetics need to apply a combination of Su and their blood to their mithril relics for it to be usable. There are two reasons why they do this. First, the blood will allow the mithril relic to be bonded to the magnetic. It will allow them to much more easily channel their abilities through this weapon. The second reason is that the Su has a special property that allows the mithril relic to withstand the power of a diva. Without Su, the mithril relic would start to disintegrate per use, completely wasting the weapon. Cerberus then gestured to Michael to give him the mithril relic. May I? Michael gave it to him, and the Tower Master began to inspect the weapon. Do you see this oily sheen on the blade? He asked. Michael looked at the weapon and saw an unmistakable gleam on the metal itself. It was as if it was dipped in oil, yet the texture of the weapon itself was the same as any other weapon. Not only that, but there seemed to be strange colors in the oil that reflected off the light. That is Su. From what I can tell, this weapon has been oiled up twice, meaning that Blazel was probably in the second stage of body formation. Am I correct? He was spot on. Each time that a magnetic wants to advance to the next stage of their body formation cultivation, they have to undergo two processes. First, they have to undergo surgery in order to put the new Godforge pieces into their hearts. Second, they have to apply another coat of Su onto their mithril relic. Michael thought for a second. So, if someone wants to get surgery, they have to seek an apothecary from the conglomerate Sinclair's elixir. Does that mean that they also have to find someone to apply Su onto their mithril relic? Very astute of you to guess. That is correct. Applying Su to a mithril relic is a very laborious task, and one that requires extreme skill and specialized powers. If one gets it wrong, not only will they damage the mithril relic, but they will also waste the very rare Su. Sinclair's elixirs monopolizes the surgery for magnetics. Meanwhile, the leading service provider for Su application is the Hephaestus Company. It's not really a monopoly like Sinclair's because there are others that can apply Su as well, but it's generally accepted that the Hephaestus Company delivers the best service. Michael took this all in, finally understanding the world of magnetics a little bit better. If he wanted to control his ability better, then that meant he needed to get his own mithril relic coated with Su. Cerberus noticed that excited look on Michael's face and immediately helped him out. You're planning to expand your Golden Road further up north, right? Michael nodded. Now that they conquered the east, it was now time to go deeper in the Queen's region. Then that means you'll eventually end up in Metropolis, the city of cities. That is where you'll find a sub-company of Sinclair's elixir. If you want to learn more about magnetics and the surgery it takes to become one, then you should go visit them. If you want to learn more about the application of Su in mithril relics, then you'll also be able to find a sub-company of the Hephaestus Company there. They won't tell you their secret process to do it, but they'll surely answer any other question pertaining to weapons and magnetics. Michael noted all of that down. It was everything he needed to find out more about magnetics. But there was something missing. You didn't tell me how I'll get Su. Cerberus pursed his lips. Well, you'll just have to pray that you're lucky. The spirit of old comes from deep in the oceans, even deeper than Atlantis. The product is controlled by none other than the Ocean King. It is extremely hard to obtain just a single drop of Su just lying around. Once in a blue moon, a vial of spirit of old is sold at the auction house in Metropolis. That's where you're likely to find Su. As for how expensive it is, I can only say that it's priceless. Every company is trying hard to obtain one for themselves, which drives up the price even more. The ones that can obtain it are the ones that are able to fork up the most money. If there was one thing that Michael lacked, then it certainly wasn't money. Sure, the expenses of all the projects and renovation on all their territories put a good dent on their treasury, but the profit that they would get in the future would definitely pump up more and more money in his pockets. But money wasn't the problem. It was whether he could chance upon Sue in an auction. Then I'll definitely visit Metropolis as soon as I can, he said, with ChatJK4 making a mental note of it. Why wait? You can do it now. Michael looked back at Cerberus. But don't I need to gather up my forces? Cerberus chuckled. You don't need to worry about that in Metropolis. It is a neutral zone that forbids major war amongst any company or faction. But what about Flare Corp? Cerberus sighed. Flare Corp has drawn the ire of most companies and factions in Metropolis. They don't like the way that Flare Corp has ruthlessly conquered Batrock Town. That is not the way that companies should conquer territories. I won't be surprised if they form a coalition to free Batrock Town from Flare Corp. Trust me, Flare Corp will probably be disbanded in a few months. Michael was glad to hear that not all companies acted like Flare Corp. If you're going to Metropolis, you'll probably be running into them. Them? The legacies. They're the sub-companies of the 5 top conglomerates of the world. They're the factions that are in Metropolis besides the Order and the Guild of Arcana. With their combined strength, Flare Corp will have no choice but to run away in fear. You should meet with them. They're nice people, Cerberus said. Since the Tower Master himself had vouched for them, then Michael couldn't wait to meet them. And if you're going to be expanding your company in Metropolis, then it's more than likely that you'll join the major factions there, no doubt about it. Once they find out all of your accomplishments here, then you'll probably go up the ranks, ha ha ha. Cerberus laughed as he looked up at the sky, wanting to see the look on those legacies' faces once they met with Michael. Surely, he won't be the only victim to his surprising talents. Then, I'll try and visit Metropolis as soon as possible. I think it'll be good to meet those legacies too, he replied. Since they were sub-companies of major conglomerates, then it was very likely that their leader was a magnetic themselves. It would be nice to learn more about them from someone magnetic. Blazelle didn't even want to talk to him after she lost her diva. Thanks for the info, he said to Cerberus, saying his goodbye. We're not finished with the game yet. But then Michael moved his queen and forced a checkmate. While the Tower Master slumped down in his chair, Michael turned into a shadow and transported himself out. It was then that people heard the sound of frustrated shouting coming from Cerberus' room in the nation of Reborn. Chapter 403, Making a Mithril Artifact. Michael transported himself directly to the dwarven district of the nation of Reborn. He wanted to visit the forge, where the ancient dwarves worked tirelessly to produce enough mithril artifacts for the entire nation. He found himself in a very hot and humid smithy, where large ovens installed on the walls radiated heat everywhere. The temperature was so hot that his absolute unity defense kicked in to prevent himself from being burned. It was very impressive that the dwarves working on the forge continued on as normal without even breaking a sweat. Boss, care to join us for a beer later? Good to see you, boss. Any more inventions we need to create? The dwarves greeted him and he greeted them back. Usually, he would rely on normal dwarves to create any structure that he needed, like the carts for the roller coasters and the plumbing pipes for Angora City. Meanwhile, the ancient dwarves focused solely on pumping out mithril artifacts or improving on them for better effects. I need some Damascus steel, he said to the dwarves. Oh, you need us to make mithril artifacts, boss? For who? Me, he replied. The ancient dwarves were shocked for a moment before feeling pressure on their shoulders. The responsibility of creating a suitable mithril artifact for the boss was a huge task, something they weren't entirely prepared for. Don't worry, he assured them. I'll make the mithril artifact myself. They heaved a sigh of relief. Don't get it wrong, though, they would be more than happy to make Michael a mithril artifact. They just weren't sure they could make one that would fit the level of prestige that Michael had amongst them and the Rebornians. One of the dwarves quickly dived towards one of their storage bins containing lots and lots of Damascus steel. They began scouring through it, trying to find the best and most pure piece they could ever find. However, after a few minutes of searching, the dwarf grunted in dissatisfaction. "Nothing here is worthy for boss," he grumbled. Michael waved off their concern. "It's fine. Any regular piece of Damascus steel would suffice," he told them. But the dwarves wouldn't accept anything less than perfect for their boss. They quickly rallied up all of their dwarves in the forge, trying to find a perfect piece for Michael. Eventually, someone just decided to get one from the very source, the Dwarven Kingdom. If there was any Damascus steel that was worthy of Michael's status, then it could only be found in the personal vault of the Dwarven King. "Hey, you don't need to bother Byru," he said. But in approximately 5 minutes, the Dwarven King himself personally delivered Michael a pristine block of Damascus steel, with its wavy and rippling design looking very organized and without any flaw or error. "Anything for my best friend," Byru said, grabbing Michael's shoulder and laughing. "You didn't have to go all the way here," Michael said to him. "Nonsense. How could I ever show my face to my ancestors if I couldn't even bring such a small gift to the man who brought us our ancient ways of Mithril?" Michael would have believed him, but the man's breath was practically smelling of beer. "You just want to relax here, don't you?" Byru grabbed at Michael's clothes and tugged on it, desperate. "They just won't let me leave the castle. They keep wanting me to sign papers and bills. I just want to drink a cold one and relax." Michael laughed and consoled Byru. "I hear ya, buddy. I hear ya. Tell them that you need my help for one day. No, a week. No, a month. A week. Any more and I would worry for the state of the Dwarven Kingdom." Byru rejoiced and immediately made plans with the other dwarves about drinking in the tavern. Of course, they couldn't really deny the request of the Dwarven King. "Join us at the baseball game tonight," said Byru. But Michael had to decline. "I'll be busy for the whole night," he said, carrying the Damascus steel block he received. And so, while Byru and the dwarves went out to have a tour of the nation, Michael situated himself into the closest forge. He put down the block of Damascus steel onto the anvil and began to think. What kind of mithril artifact do I want to create? He knew that this decision was important because Cerberus told him that mithril artifacts were kind of permanent. Once Su was coated into the weapon, it would remain in that state forever. If Michael wanted to change weapons midway in his cultivation, then he would have to reapply the coat of Su onto the weapon, wasting a lot of the very rare oil. "Should I go with a weapon?" he asked himself. Immediately, his gut said no. After all, he had never even held a weapon before. It wouldn't really work with his style of fighting too. Then maybe a wand? It was true that he mostly used mystical spells to fight, but he didn't really feel any sort of connection with a wand. Other mages could perform better with a wand, but Michael didn't need them. My mithril artifact should be a tool of some kind. He came to this conclusion because he prided himself in being a creator first. That was his main thing back when he reincarnated into this world. He wanted to create the comfort he had back then. A hammer? A chisel? A wrench? All sorts of tools came to mind, but nothing felt right. In the end, he decided to consult his partner, ChatJK4. "What do you think? What is a tool that best represents me? According to your personality type, there is one thing that is best suited as your mithril artifact. It is..." As ChatJK4 gave him an answer, Michael smiled. That was a very creative choice by his personal AI assistant, and one that he was amazed with. The problem was that this was quite a complicated set of circuitry that he had yet to create. Thankfully, though, having complete control of the southern tip of the Queen's region allowed him to gather resources that were quite rare to find. And so, he quickly contacted Shiina via shadows and began telling her of all the items that he needed. He only needed the raw form of these ingredients, and he could process them all by himself to make it into whatever the blueprint required. "You can expect these things to be delivered in an hour, Lord Michael," Shiina replied from the shadows. "No need to rush," he replied to her. "Then I shall make sure they're delivered within 30 minutes, she said. And true enough, within 30 minutes, a shadow appeared in front of him and transported all the raw materials such as copper, magnets, and other such items that he needed. He was very thankful that Shiina was quite the competent secretary, or else it would have taken him days to gather all of this stuff. Once everything was ready, Michael started his preparations. ChatJK4 immediately gave him the blueprint for the machine, which was altered to become a lot simpler than the normal ones he had in his previous life. A lot of the materials were also replaced with Damascus steel in order to make it into a mithril artifact. Chapter 404, Michael's Weapon. Magic circles appeared around Michael as he began to process and mold all the raw materials he received into the desired shape and size according to the blueprints. Hammers floated in the air, smashing onto metal. Copper wires levitated in the air and began to coil around a cylindrical Damascus steel chunk. There were a lot of processes that took him an hour, but finally, he was done creating a brushless motor, capable of turning electrical energy into mechanical energy. Then, he created these propellers that connected to the motor, allowing it to rotate through the movement of the motor. These were the only complicated things he needed to create using normal technology. The rest of it was made out of Damascus steel, serving no other purpose than to create the shape of the machine. He molded the Damascus steel using his magic, creating precise curves and edges according to the blueprint given to him by ChatJK4. As the machine was taking shape, Michael began to inject the Damascus steel with his mana. Using a technique similar to how a physical fighter gathers mana, Michael was able to evenly distribute all 8 mana elements into the Damascus steel without it turning into a unity bomb. Slowly, the metallic texture of the metal began to fade, replaced by the crystal-like appearance of the mithril artifact. It was slightly opaque, with a white glow shining from the very depths of the metal. As it finished, Michael stared at his creation, amazed at his own mithril artifact. It was very unique. He was sure that if anyone ever saw this, they wouldn't understand what it was or what it did. Only he and Yuna would know. Right now, this machine was still inactive. That was because it was missing one integral piece: the battery. Of course, he could use a normal lithium battery in order to power this machine, but that would be very inconvenient. First of all, he would have to create another suitable battery for it. And second of all, he needed to recharge it constantly because of the machine's hunger for power. But there was an alternative that fit perfectly into a mithril artifact. And that was a unity bomb. Using the normal method of creating mithril artifacts, the same way a mystical mage gathers mana in the body, putting all 8 elements into a Damascus steel would result in a very volatile and unstable material that would explode upon the slightest bit of contact with anything. That was what he called a unity bomb. But, through experiments, he found out that if he created a small enough material and with the right amount of mana, it could become stable enough to be used as an eternal power source. It was what he called a unity battery. This worked because the mithril would constantly gather mana from the surroundings, keeping it powered every time. So, he pinched off a very small piece of Damascus steel from the block and molded it into the shape of a AAA battery. He injected it with all 8 elements using no complex methods, simply brute forcing it inside. And soon, the mithril artifact was filled with the immense power of unity mana. Contained within this small vessel was enough energy that could turn an entire village into a crater. He slowly inserted this unity battery onto the machine. And with a satisfying click, the machine roared to life. Bzzzzzzz. The propellers whizzed, creating enough lift for the machine to take flight into the air. Michael had created a drone. This was his mithril artifact. However, what he created was a very crude and very simplified version of a drone. First of all, it didn't have any complicated circuitry like electronic speed controllers or transmitters and receivers. It didn't even have a navigation system, gyroscope, accelerometer, or anything like that. It only had its 4 propellers connected to a motor. The only thing that the drone could do was fly upwards and nothing more. Of course, if he wanted to, he could have put all the bells and whistles that a first-rate drone would have back in his previous life. But he just felt like he didn't need to. After all, he could already control the drone even without a controller. As the drone continued its flight upwards, Michael focused on the unity contained inside the mithril artifact. They were still made out of mana, which meant that he had complete and absolute control over it. His supreme skill grabbed onto the drone, allowing him to control its movements through thought alone. This was even better than if he used a controller. VZZZZ. The drone flew down and whizzed past him. It flew over a tree and dove down towards a bald spot in its crown. Then, it quickly turned upside down and looped around one of its branches before zooming past towards Michael again. It was like a fish in water. He felt intuitively connected to the drone now, allowing him to control it even if he wasn't looking at it. Eventually, he willed it to a stop right in front of his palm. But still, he had no type of circuitry attached to the battery itself. Of course, there was another solution for that as well. He took out a switch from his pockets and quickly attached it to the Unity battery. And once he manifested his diva and activated his ability, the switch immediately turned off. With the Unity battery no longer active, the drone soon lost its power and descended into his palms. And with a single thought, the switch flipped on and the drone roared to life. He then took out another switch from his pockets and attached it to one of the grooves at the very bottom of the drone. Then he let the machine take flight. He set his sights into the distance, where eventually, he saw an acorn falling from a tree. He willed the drone into action, whizzing through the air at relatively fast speeds. As it got closer, the drone quickly flipped sideways, letting its underside point directly at the falling acorn. And with one thought from Michael, a spring burst forth from the bottom of the drone, releasing the switch that had been loaded into the groove. The switch accurately hit the acorn before hitting the ground, freezing it in the air. It worked, he rejoiced. Then, he controlled the drone to come towards the floating acorn and use its underbelly to pick off the switch that had been attached to its side. And once the switch was no longer attached, the acorn fell to the ground and rolled around, before a squirrel pushed it in its cheeks. This was one of the best uses for a drone, and why he chose it as his mithril artifact. With the drone, he could easily attach his switches anywhere he wanted to without any problem. Not only that, but he could also modify it with lots of other complicated features. But of course, that was for the future. Once he was done testing it out, he then folded the wings of the drone and turned it into a compact box, one that could fit squarely into his pockets. And just like that, he had created his mithril artifact. Now, he just needed to coat it with the spirit of old, or Su, to make it a suitable weapon for a magnetic. Chapter 405, Boy's Plan to Escape. With his mithril artifact stored perfectly in his pockets, Michael left the forge and returned to the Reborn headquarters in the Parched Lands. Eventually, he was approached by Jimmy, the news correspondent of the Reborn company. "Michael, I have good news and I have some not-so-bad news," sort of, Jimmy said with pursed lips. "Tell me the good news first." "Well, I can safely say that the Reborn company has achieved enough feats for it to go up in the rankings of the Golden 500, Jimmy said, tapping his own chest in pride. "What's the bad news?" he asked. "The newspaper company in Enogra City is not large enough to officially upgrade your rankings. The best that they are able to upgrade a company is the 450th rank, which is where you currently rank now. See, Angora City might be a capital city, but it has already long lost its prestige throughout the years because of the absence of the Golden Road. And the powers that be declared that Angora City is not competitive enough for a company to achieve a ranking above the 450th rank." Michael nodded along. "Does that mean that we have to go somewhere else to get our new ranking?" "Precisely." Jimmy slammed his foot. "We need a place that's really competitive, with lots of high-ranking companies to compare ourselves with. There is one location in mind. Let me guess."
Metropolis.
Jimmy looked back at Michael with surprise, wondering how he guessed his next words. "Yes, Metropolis has a newspaper company that is authorized to give a ranking that is 200 and below. It would be great if you could expand the Reborn company there as your next move." Michael already had plans to go to Metropolis because of what Cerberus told him. But advancing in the Golden 500 rankings wouldn't be too bad either. "Don't worry," he said to Jimmy. "That will be our next move. For now, I would really like it if you go to Metropolis and scout ahead for us. Do you know about a group called the Legacies?" Jimmy scratched his chin and nodded. "Yes, I have heard of them. They are the ones that have the biggest market shares in Metropolis. It's not a secret that these guys are inheritors of a conglomerate as well. Michael nodded. I want you to find out what you can about them. Who they are, which family they're from, that kind of stuff. His words sent a fire within Jimmy's heart. This was just the kind of task that would scratch his journalistic itch. You can count on me, Michael. I won't disappoint. Jimmy didn't wait any longer and took a train back to the Queen's region. Michael offered for him to use a shadow orc for teleportation, but the rookie journalist refused, saying that he needed to feel the ground by himself, whatever that meant. Once Michael dealt with that, he soon entered the main office building of Reborn, where he saw a completely different vision than the one he was used to. Jakku, Zion, Fudge, and even Grieve was stuck in 4 connected desks, doing their best to sift through piles and piles of paperwork with Shiina just behind them, with a bow locked and loaded ready to fire. Lord Michael, welcome back. Shiina greeted with a smile, but never letting the tension in her bow loose. Bro Mike, help, Zion muttered, lethargic. His eyes looked unfocused, as if he was starting to go crazy. Ha! No more, Jakku said, with his scales paler than even Shiina. The Dragonborn looked like he had wilted. Master, this is not the ninja way, Fudge complained, looking like a puddle of violet liquid on the table. I'm sad, huh? What was I saying? Oh right, I'm sad. Grieve, on the other hand, somehow looked even more aged even though he was already a skeleton. While the boys were having the worst time of their lives, the girls, on the other hand, were just relaxing on the balcony outside, drinking tea and chuckling to themselves. Umisu, Yuna, Vivi, Virian, and his mother were all passing around hot tea and biscuits, enjoying the view of the nation of Reborn outside. And the one that was serving them was none other than his father, Bart. The dignified Vanderbilt businessman was reduced to being a butler in front of these women. Dad? What are you doing here? He asked. Bart looked back up at Michael and smiled. Meanwhile, Lilia was the one who answered for him. Your father here is proving his worth to us, to see if he could go with us or not. Michael was confused. Go where? Lilia chuckled. With you, silly. You're going to expand the nation of Reborn to Metropolis, aren't you? Well, you're going to need a lot of support. And who better to go with you than us, your parents? Oh, Bart, more tea, please. Bart obediently poured tea in her cup. Then he quickly turned to Yuna. Yuna, dear? Would you like one as well? Yuna smiled back and nodded. Yes, please. Of course, Bart replied. Anything for my future daughter-in-law. Michael soon turned lethargic as well, slumping down on the chair right next to him. There's 2 of them, he grimaced. One of the reasons why he fixed up his parents was because he wanted them to entertain each other. He thought that if they returned to their marriage, they would stay in the nation of Reborn and stop bothering him with all these awkward setups with Yuna. But as it turned out, he was completely wrong. He had just created another monster. Okay, shift's over. You all have 5 minutes of break before you start on another batch of paperwork, Shiina said to the boys, lowering her bow. With the workload no longer bearing down on their shoulders, the boys slumped down on the ground. I can't do this anymore, Jakku whimpered. Michael consoled him and wept with him as well. As the boys bonded through mutual pain, Fudge immediately sprang back into normal form and signaled for the boys to look at him. Pest! Fudge whispered. The slime first looked back at the girls. Thankfully, Shiina had already taken a seat at the tea table with her back turned away from them. Fudge discreetly hopped on over to the back rooms of the office, where boxes and shelves of paperwork were being stored. Michael and the boys looked back at the girls before slowly making their way towards the back rooms. Once they entered inside, they were met with a very dark room with the lights turned off. Then the door closed. A single light clicked right on top of them as Fudge appeared beside them and forced them to huddle up into a circle. Why are we here? Michael asked Fudge. Master, don't you want to be away from this place? Don't you want to just be free from paperwork, from responsibility, from Shiina? The Dragonborns nodded vehemently, while Grieve quietly disagreed. He already forgot what she put him through. I have heard something from the Shadow Orcs, Fudge said, looking at everyone with a serious face. They said that Flare Corp is scrambling to escape something. They've started to evacuate Batroc Town as well. And it seems that one of their major officers, the 2ND in command, is running away in our direction. He's on his way to Angora City as we speak. Boys, it's time for a hunt. Chapter 406. Rendezvous. Really? Are you sure about this? Jaku asked, skeptical. Yes, I'm sure. Who do you think I am? You're staring at the best ninja in the world. My information gathering skills are top-notch. Fudge replied, a little bit offended. It's just hard to believe that the second in command would flee their base. Did you happen to know the reason? Michael answered that. I heard from Cerberus that FlareCorp is getting attacked by a group called the Legacies from Metropolis. They're punishing them for conquering Batroc Town so ruthlessly. Good for them, Zion said. It looks like these Legacies are reasonable people. Then we should just stay back and let them deal with FlareCorp. That way we don't have to do anything, Jaku argued. And let them have all the glory to themselves? Fudge shouted. This is a large fish that happened to get caught up in our trap. We shouldn't waste this chance and attack. Ho ho ho. I agree with Senior Slime, Grieve commented. The best enemies to hunt are those that are on the run. I have done that many times and won. I think. Zion grabbed Jaku's collar and begged him. Please, bro. Would you rather stay in this place and fill up paperwork for hours at a time? Jaku felt a tingle on his spine the moment he remembered those grueling hours. You're right. War is better than paperwork, he said. And this is also a chance for Master to become stronger. Fudge turned to Michael. Master, you want more Godforge pieces, right? Michael smiled. Hell yeah, I do. Then it's decided. We'll attack the running FlareCorp army and hunt down their 2ND in command. The boys calmly raised their hands together and cheered with hushed voices. Meanwhile, the girls were completely unaware of what the boys were planning as they kept on sipping tea and eating biscuits. Deep in the night, Michael and the boys sneaked out of their rooms to rendezvous in a secure location away from any prying eyes. As Michael finished his transportation skill, he opened his eyes to see that he was at one of the arcade rooms in the nation of Reborn. This place had board games, mini-baseball, and other such fun activities to play with a group. Even at night, the place was still jam-packed with tourists and locals alike, as this was one of the premier spots to relax and unwind. It was very crowded, with no private rooms for them to talk alone. Michael sat in one of the tables available, and soon enough the rest of the boys arrived. Why did we gather here? We're out in public. What if the girls see us? Zion said, looking over his shoulder like a paranoid man. Fudge shook his head. Tsk, tsk, tsk. This is the most private place we could have picked. There's no way that Shiina would go to something like this. Therefore, she wouldn't ever know that we were here. Zion and Jaka both had a moment of realization. That's genius. Michael then put the focus back on the topic. So, what are the details about the FlareCorp army? Fudge smiled. It's very good, Master. According to our Shadow Orcs, their army is only made up of 500 5-star soldiers. Now, for others that would be a terrifying number, especially since they would be fighting them with no army of their own, just the 5 of them. But of course, their combined powers were more than enough to take care of those soldiers. Grieve alone could defeat more than half of them without problem. The problem now laid with their leader, the 2ND in command of the entire FlareCorp company. His name is Arseny, and he's the one that controls the entire army of FlareCorp. According to what our spies have gathered, it seems that he was personally sent to the lower part of the Queen's region to assess their escape route. It seems that they don't even know what happened to Blazel yet. So, Arseny is on his way to the East Forest to try and meet up with her. It truly seemed that FlareCorp was getting pressured from all sides. They wouldn't send in their second-in-command for a simple scouting mission if they weren't truly desperate. It was obvious that FlareCorp was afraid of the coalition of all the legacies in Metropolis, or else they wouldn't have rushed their moves so soon. We can intercept them in the forest, giving us the advantage, Fudge said. We just need to wait one more day before we can hunt them down. Oh, I can't wait to wreak havoc on their forces, Zion said, punching the air. Fudge then went on to give them a very detailed account as to what they were going to expect when they attacked Arseny. It seemed that Fudge himself had surveyed the whole situation, allowing the information to be as accurate as anyone could have found out. Soon after their meeting, they all dispersed to make their preparations for the battle that was to come. They sharpened their mithril artifacts, replenished chocolate supplies, and just warmed up in general. Meanwhile, Michael prepared for the fight by summoning his drone and his diva to practice his abilities. The drone flew with precision according to his thoughts, sweeping in the air, launching switches and retracting them. Once he was sure that it was all in good condition, he did his final preparations by creating another switch for him to use. Since one of the switches he had was used for the drone's battery, he now only had 2 in his arsenal. So, he focused his mind and began to beckon for the ground to give him another piece of raw iron ore. And in just a few moments, a chunk of iron ore burst out of the soil and landed in front of Michael's hands. It didn't take long before his diva began to do its magic onto the raw iron ore, melting it and molding it into a fine, precision artwork that only electricians could appreciate. Now, he had 3 switches ready to be used. But just as he was about to retract his diva from reality, he suddenly realized that he wasn't feeling the least bit tired from the creation of the switch. Usually, after creating the 3rd switch, he would be unable to focus his mind into using his ability, limiting the amount of switches he could use. But now, he didn't feel that exhaustion at all. He felt as rejuvenated as he was before. Could it be? Following this hunch, Michael closed his eyes and focused on his mind once again. A few seconds later, another chunk of raw iron ore burst forth from the ground and floated right in front of him. He then offered this iron ore up to his diva for it to mold. And suddenly, the robotic hand glimmered with futuristic pulsating lights as it used its mini mechanical limbs to form the iron ore into another switch. He now had 4 switches. He then put all of them in the ground and willed them all to turn on. And it did. All 4 of them clicked as it switched on. This meant he could command all 4 of these switches simultaneously. Is that the limit? He asked himself. Chapter 407. Switches galore. Michael knew in his heart of hearts that this wasn't the end of it. He felt like he could make more switches if he wanted to. Spurred on by this feeling, Michael closed his eyes and began to concentrate even more, willing the iron found on the ground to form into a chunk and float towards his hand. The futuristic robotic arm above him reached down, taking the iron ore in its hand before beginning to mold it into the switch. And before the diva was even finished with its construction, Michael focused once again and willed another iron ore to come close to him. As the diva finished the switch, it immediately went back and reached for the new iron ore, creating a new one without even a single break. Michael was astonished. The fact that he didn't feel any fatigue or exhaustion meant that he could create as many switches as he wanted without limit. This was a complete change from when he could only command 3 switches at a time. He immediately looked at the floating drone in front of him. Just because of this, he thought, his mithril artifact allowed him to break the limits of his ability. But how is this possible? I thought only mithril relics who had been coated with Su can enhance an ability. According to Cerberus, coating a mithril relic with the spirit of old meant that they could funnel the diva's power and allow a magnetic to use it much better than before. But somehow he could do that without Su. After giving it some thought, he realized that the reason must have been because he wielded a mithril artifact, not a relic. His weapon was still in tip-top condition, while mithril relics had been corroded over time, meaning that it had probably lost most of its power because of it. This was an advantage he didn't think he would have. But now, he was glad that he didn't have to get his own Su in order to get its benefits. I have also noted that your drone has not experienced any deterioration at all. This means that you do not have to use Su to protect it from your diva's power. ChatJK4 added. Does that mean I don't have to use Su? Michael wouldn't complain. After all, the spirit of old was something extremely rare to get. He was glad that he didn't have to go through all of that trouble to improve his mithril artifact. Now armed with this power, Michael began to stock up as many switches as he could possibly make. So much so that he probably wouldn't run out even if he used 1,000 of them at the same time. He also tested them out, starting with controlling 10 switches at the same time. Seeing that he could do it, he immediately went up to 50, then 100, and then to 1,000. Theoretically, he felt like he could control all of them. However, it was practically hard to do so. It was like concentrating on reading while 1,000 television were simultaneously blasting music. It wasn't impossible, but it was extremely hard to control all of them. But he wasn't disheartened by this. In a true fight, he probably wouldn't use more than 100 of them at the same time. He already tested this out and found out that it worked smoothly without any problems. He spent the rest of the day continuing to experiment with the switches and train using his drone to place and detach them anywhere he wanted. On the very next day, Shiina woke up early in the day to supervise the boys on another session of paperwork. But as she entered their rooms, all she saw were empty beds and a small note that said, "Sorry. Feeling sick today. I'll work tomorrow." Now, the fact that they got sick at all was the very first red flag. Ever since they became Dragonborns, they never got sick. Not even once. But even then, the fact that every single one of them had the same excuse meant that something fishy was going on. She also went over to Michael's room and saw Lilia already by the door. "Lord Michael is gone too?" she asked Lilia. "Yup. Those boys are up to something," Lilia said, squinting her eyes. But of course, by the time they found this out, Michael and the boys were already out of the parched lands and entered back into the Queen's region. They hid on the very edge of the eastern forest, hiding by the bushes and waiting for their target to come running towards them. "Are you sure they'll come here?" Jaku asked Fudge. "Stop worrying. They'll be here." "I'm starting to worry. At this point, what if Sis Shiina comes in and ruins everything?" Zion said, biting his nails. "I would rather just meet the army head on than just wait here. I feel like my mom is already breathing down my neck," Michael said, shivering. Michael and the boys were more worried about the girls rather than fighting an actual army. Meeting one meant death, and meeting the other meant that they would have to find 500 new spots in Reborn prison. It made sense why. Eventually, Michael saw something in the distance. With his supreme skill, he was able to see past the rolling hills in front of them and saw organized rows and columns of light mana trekking the land. These were none other than the Flarecorp army that they were expecting. "Here they are," he said to the group. "Are you all ready?" Jaku held his sword's hilt and muttered a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Zion shouted, springing out of the bushes and rushing towards the army alone. "Hey, I didn't say go yet," Jaku complained. Fudge turned into a shadow and zoomed past the rolling hills and towards the Flarecorp army. Even Michael had already gone off flying in the air, getting ready to intercept the army. "Ho ho ho, we better get going, Sir Jaku, or else we'll lose out on all the fun." Jaku shook his head, before a smile crept on his face. As he pulled out the sword from his sheath, his body turned into blue lightning that raced through the lands, eventually passing Zion, who quickly tried to catch up. "Ho ho ho! Youth!" Grieve cheered, seeing all the young Yunus be so active. "Me though, I shall take my time." He then slowly walked towards the rolling hills, using his sword as a cane just like an old man. Meanwhile, the 500-men Flarecorp army eventually noticed the change in the air. Even if they weren't paying attention, Michael and the boys weren't exactly hiding their presence. They could see lighting zooming in the air, a shadow looming over them, a golden-haired boy floating in the air, and a lizard-like boy punching the air and creating shockwaves. At the very end of this army was a man whose hair was short and was colored a fiery red. It rose up in the air, creating the illusion that he had fire on the top of his head. This was none other than Arseny, the 2ND in command of the entire Flarecorp company. Some would say he was the entire brains of the operation. But right now, he had no idea what he was seeing. Chapter 408. Facing against the Flarecorp army. Now that he was closer, Michael finally had a good look at the supposed 2ND in command of the Flarecorp company. Arseny wore bright orange armor, with symbolisms of tyrannical fire embedded into its very design. He looked regal compared to the other soldiers who wore the signature Flarecorp chestplate. Not only that, but he was riding a horse who had the flag of Flarecorp attached to its side. Michael, As he floated in the air, made eye contact with Sunny. "You came from the East Forest," Arseny observed. "Blazel is supposed to welcome our troops. Are you part of the bastard bandits?" As expected, the 2ND in command was a lot more perceptive than Michael thought. "No, I'm not," Michael replied. "The bastard bandits have disbanded." Arseny showed a face of shock, before his eyes focused as he tried to process the information. "Then, I'm guessing that you are not here to welcome the great army of Flarecorp?" "No, I'm not," Michael once again replied. By now, Zion, Jakku, Fudge, and Grieve had all taken their respective spots in front of the Flarecorp army. It was them versus 500 soldiers in the 5-star realm, with only a few hundred meters in between them. "Then surrender to the glory of Flarecorp. This territory shall soon become the new headquarters of our nation." Michael smiled. "And what will happen if we don't surrender?" Arseny stared up at Michael, with fire burning in his eyes. "Then I shall send in my forces to decimate your small group. There shall be nothing that stands in the way of our Flarecorp company." The 500-men army slammed the bottom of their spears in the ground, creating a shockwave that slightly shook the earth. But it seems that this wasn't enough to intimidate Michael and his small group. "What do you think, guys?" he asked them. "Should we surrender?" Zion cracked his neck and his fist. "I didn't wait all that time just to come home empty-handed. Ho ho ho. I may not have any memory, but I sure know that I have never backed out from a fight," Grieve said, his ribs clacking as he laughed. "You heard them," Michael said to Arseny, shrugging. The commander looked absolutely pissed from hearing Michael's nonchalance at the whole situation. This belittled the prestige and power of a Flarecorp army. "I suggest that you think it over again," Arseny said. "You don't know who you're dealing with here." Michael smiled. "We'll take our chances. Then you have just sealed your fate. Soldiers, teach these guys a lesson," Arseny shouted, with his voice creating a literal fire within the army formation. Flames erupted high up into the skies, enveloping the 500 soldiers inside. They each began to emit magic circles on their body, consuming the fire around them to boost and enhance their physical capabilities. Arseny scanned Michael's accomplices before his eyes landed onto the red-scaled demi-human lizard. Arani had no idea what kind of species he was, but he was sure that the kid only had a 3-star realm cultivation at best. He scanned the other people too. The blue-scaled lizard was also only in the 3-star realm, and the hooded figure behind them was so weak that they didn't even give off any power signatures. He raised his hand, and from his palm burst forth a fireball that shot towards the sky and exploded in the air, creating a strange pattern. The soldiers looked up at this pattern and immediately knew what they were supposed to do. "Charge!" the soldiers shouted. With perfect synchronization, the soldiers marched out into these perfect formations of 50 men, forming a platoon. Each platoon focused on a single target, aiming to bring them down with barely half of their entire forces. The first platoon charged at Zion, their spears creating a phalanx formation. As they charged, their powers created a 5-star spell that formed a shimmering figure of a rhino's horn. Zion smiled as he welcomed his new target. He skipped around like a boxer waiting on his corner. And just as the platoon of soldiers were only 100 meters away, he pulled out his mithril artifact gauntlets and wielded it in his hands. The mithril artifact improved the flow of the mana from his body, boosting his initial strength of a 3-star all the way to a 4-star power. But that wasn't enough. He took out a chocolate pellet from his pockets and swallowed it whole. The Rebornian skill, Sugar Rush, gave him a boost of magic, allowing him to break through his limits and reach the 5-star level and almost above it. Arseny immediately stood straight as he realized what had happened. But before he could even process this information, Zion suddenly jumped up from his stationary position and reached the air just above the platoon. Zion's gauntlets glowed a violet light before he punched the air, creating a crack in the fabric of space. The crack propagated downwards before reaching the platoon's formation. Their combined 5-star spell resisted the power of the space-shattering punch. But before they could even rally their strengths together, the rhino's horn started to shake and wobble before eventually exploding into bits of ember. As Zion's punch propagated to the ground, the soldiers exploded out into the air, breaking their formation entirely. "How is this possible?" Arseny complained. But before he could even take a moment to think, he felt another disturbance in the air. Jakku had turned into literal blue lightning as the platoon of soldiers rushed towards him. Their combined 5-star spell allowed them to create an enclosure of fire, trapping their target within. The soldiers swung their spears with power and speed, creating gusts of flame with each of their attacks. But even so, they were unable to catch even a single whiff of the blue-scaled lizard. Each time they would get close, he would turn into lightning and buzz around, electrifying everyone he touched. It only took less than 30 seconds from the formation of their enclosure before their numbers dwindled low enough for their spell to break in concentration. Eventually, Jakku stood amongst a sea of soldiers on the ground, each one burned and electrified. "Who are these people?" Arseny asked himself. They were far too powerful to be unknown fighters. But the worst part was that they weren't even the only ones decimating his forces. Without him even realizing it, one of the platoons had already been engulfed by a strange shadowy figure. They stood barely conscious in a dome of shadows. They stared at the air, as if they didn't have a single thought in their minds. Arseny couldn't even see who was doing this, and before he could scan the area for the shadowy perpetrator, he suddenly felt something that made his skin crawl. He looked to the side and saw that his platoon of soldiers were slowly backing away. They were running from the decay that spread through the ground, wilting everything that it touched. The soldiers tried to fight this decay through their flame spells, but even their flames decayed from contact with the ground. Arseny looked towards the source of this decay and saw a skeleton figure standing still, with a thin sword in its hands. As Arseny felt the power coming from the skeleton monster, he realized why his arm hairs were standing up. This monster was in the 9-star realm. Chapter 409, Red Flames. Grieve raised up his thin sword and waved it in the air. His movement was slow, almost too slow for it to do any real damage. Yet, a few moments after he finished his swing, the entire platoon suddenly felt themselves struck with the blade directly in their chests, with necrotic energy suddenly disintegrating their proud FlareCorp chest plates into rust. An undead monster! How are they controlling it? The more and more Arseny fought with this strange group, the more he realized that their confidence was not just empty bravado. They were the real thing. The rest of his army charged forward after seeing each platoon get decimated by these single individuals. Even without Arseny's instructions, they knew that they had to put all of their efforts together if they had any chance of defeating them. However, their large numbers meant nothing to these people. Zion's punches broke through space, creating a shockwave of disturbance that destroyed all of their formations. Jakku's lightning-fast sword was untouchable, defeating tens of soldiers just before the thunder cracked in his wake. Fudge kept himself hidden in the shadows, abducting any soldier he touched into an insurmountable illusion that kept them standing in place, completely vulnerable to any attacks. And the most dangerous of them all was Grieve, whose 9-star power completely destroyed any coordinated magic spell that these soldiers could think of. His swings looked normal, yet it would decimate almost 10% of the soldiers each time, decaying their armor and weapons into rust particles that flew into the wind. Arseny knew at this moment that his army was about to lose. This unknown group of individuals had somehow bested FlareCorp's best of the best. "You guys have no idea who you have angered. This world has powers that you do not even comprehend," he said, summoning all the strength he could muster. He raised his halberd in the air, its blade suddenly glowing an orange light as he started to unleash the power hidden in his chest. A flame emerged on his entire body before a shimmering figure appeared above his head. The roaring head of a lion appeared above Arseny, with its mane filled with that of blazing flames that only seemed to grow hotter as the lion slowly awakened. This was Arseny's diva, a flaming lion. However, this diva's body was still clearly incomplete. The only thing that was manifested was its head, with the rest of the body still yet to appear. But that was enough to bring back the dwindling morale of the FlareCorp soldiers. They suddenly gained a new sense of confidence as they saw the appearance of this flaming lion. They knew that their commander would finally unleash one of his greatest strengths that surely none of these people had ever even seen before. The fire on this diva lit up their spirits once again, giving them a second wind to rally up their power and defend against these powerful individuals. With the formation of his diva, Arseny burst into action. He jumped up from his horse and charged towards Zion and the rest of them. Seeing this, Zion's smile seemed to only grow wider. He took this as a challenge. With his gauntlets glowing with a violet power, he stepped back before unleashing one of his strongest attacks. He punched the air multiple times, creating more and more shattered fabric of space that eventually traveled down towards the speeding Arseny. Zion's barrage of punches traveled through multiple soldiers, each one launching far away the moment the shattered space propagated towards them. However, as it reached Arseny, he raised up his halberd with both his hands and reared it up behind him. And just as Zion's space-breaking barrage of punches reached him, he swung his halberd wide, meeting the punch head-on. The two powers clashed, creating a shockwave that sent the weaker soldiers flying. Even the ground began to crumble, creating a crater at the point of impact. Zion's attack was an unrelenting force, continuing to add more power even after the collision. And for a moment, it even seemed as if Zion was going to win this battle. But it was at that moment that Arseny's diva shouted a silent roar, with its flaming mane bursting forth with life. Suddenly, Arseny's halberd erupted in a pure red flame, a power that did not contain a single ounce of mana, yet its power was enough to fight against Zion's power. The red fire spread towards the shattered space of Zion's punches, engulfing it in a red flame. "Submit!" Arseny commanded. And suddenly, the shattered space engulfed in red flames suddenly lost all of its power. Zion felt its connection with the spell break, as if he no longer had control of it at all. "Return for me," Arseny added. And suddenly, the shattered punches began to turn back, creating a shattered space that reached towards Zion at speeds far faster than his original spell. Zion felt his own shattering punch come towards him at full speed. This was the first time that the young Dragonborn felt his own spell backfire on him. With his physical speed, Zion could have dodged away at the very last second. But his stubbornness got the better of him, and he ended up powering his gauntlets a second time to try and beat his own power. He punched the air, his arms almost blurring as he released a flurry of blows even faster than when he used it the first time. A new shattered space appeared in front of Zion. As soon as his final punch landed, the cracks propagated forward, coming face to face with flaming red shattered space. The two collided, creating sparks of lightning as the two cracks crashed into one another. Wind picked up from the impact, turning the green field into a bald crater, turning deeper and deeper as the two forces fought against each other. "Empower!" Arseny shouted, and soon, the red flames enveloping the cracks suddenly grew even bigger and hotter. The cracks seemed to have gained a new strength as it started to overpower Zion's attack. Seeing this, Zion didn't hesitate to jump forward and create more space-breaking punches to defeat Arseny's counterattack. But it was at that moment that the red flames grew larger, soon enveloping Zion's attacks. Zion felt his own power get cut off once again. The two cracks, once fighting, had ceased all conflicts and merged together to become a giant crack in space. Soon, this giant zombified amalgamation of Zion's punches combined, and then started to shoot towards its sender. "There is nothing that my flames cannot conquer," Arseny said. "You were a formidable fighter, but you too shall perish in the face of Flarecorp's greatness." The giant flaming red cracks would soon envelop Zion, and there was nothing that would stop it. Arseny knew it was over. He turned around, scanning the battlefield for his next target. But it was in that moment that silence reigned. A couple of seconds had passed, yet the crash that was supposed to have resulted in a large explosion never happened. He turned around, only to see the red flaming cracks frozen in the air, just a few meters away from Zion. "Phew," the young Dragonborn said. "Thanks for the save, bro Mike." Chapter 410. Flaming Lion. Arseny felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The flaming lion above him was growling, as if it was wary of something. He slowly panned up his head to the skies, only to see the golden-haired boy standing in the air. This child had stayed away from the battlefield this whole time. Arseny thought that he was just a spectator, nothing more than a kid who tagged along without knowing anything. Yet as he looked up at the skies, he saw something that he could not believe. Above the boy's head, there was an image of a right hand made out of metal, whose veins seemed to be glowing with a strange white light. The fact that his own flaming lion diva had noticed this right hand meant only one thing. It was a diva. How is this possible? Arseny muttered under his breath, his eyes trying to adjust. He tried to scrutinize the figure, wanting to see if it was just an ordinary illusion. However, the more he observed it, the more he realized that it was the real deal. Somehow, an unknown child had gotten his hands on one of the strongest metals in the world and obtained an ability all on his own. This was akin to a monkey suddenly learning how to speak and write. This shouldn't have happened, especially in a backwoods part of the Queen's region. "Who are you, really?" Arseny asked. There was no way that a boy would be able to obtain a diva accidentally. It had to have involved a healer who surgically placed the Godforge piece in his heart. "Me? I'm the leader of the Reborn company," Michael replied. The fact that Arseny had no idea of this name made even less sense. If it was low enough in the Golden 500 ranking, then there was no way it was powerful enough to obtain even a single Godforge piece. "How did you obtain that diva?" "I just found it," Michael replied. "Oh, and Blazel gave her piece to me. Or more accurately, I took it from her." The moment Blazel's name was mentioned, a sense of realization came to pass in Arseny's mind. She would never betray Flarecorp. This means that you defeated her. I think I understand it now. Your Reborn company has somehow defeated Blazel and the army we sent her, foiling our plans to conquer this entire region, Arseny said. "And looking at your members," he said, looking at the Rebornians, "it's not hard to see how they lost." "Ding, ding, ding. You got it right. Bleh," Zion said, sticking out his tongue. "They tried to attack us." "Well, you know what happened," Jaka said, sheathing his sword. Arseny ignored them and focused on Michael. "But it still doesn't make sense. How did you defeat her and obtain a diva for yourself?" Michael shrugged. "The Godforge pieces just came to me," he said truthfully. But Arseny just scoffed, thinking that it was a bold-faced lie. "It does not matter. I will force you to tell me the truth once I have proved my diva superior to yours." "Try," Michael challenged. "Humph. Such confidence for someone only in the second stage of body formation. Meanwhile, I am already on the third stage and have matured enough to advance to the next one. Once I have defeated you, I will take back Blazel's Godforge pieces and surgically implement them to myself." Arseny squatted deep in the ground, holding the halberd in both hands and sweeping it in an arc around him. The red fire of the mithril relic weapon spread to the ground in a circle, creating a crescent platform that Arseny could stand on. "Arise," he commanded. And soon, the chunk of soil on the ground lifted in the air and began to hover, allowing Arseny to float closer towards Michael. "So anything that touches your weapon has to follow your words," Michael observed. "That is correct," Arseny nodded. In his mind, the results of the fight wouldn't matter even if Michael figured out his power. "A lion is the king of the jungle. My flaming lion is the king of everything in the world. Anything my fire touches will submit to my words." "Interesting," Michael said, nodding in satisfaction. "I do not know how you prevented my flames from hitting your red-scaled friend from below, but it doesn't matter. It was a fluke." Arseny raised his hand, beckoning the platform underneath his feet to charge towards Michael. And with his halberd in hand, he swung it in a straight vertical line towards Michael. "Even your clothes will strangle you," Arseny said, intending to use his red flames on Michael. Michael's feet blasted off air, allowing him to dodge easily from Arseny's swing. "Humph, you're fast, but..." Before he could even finish his sentence, he suddenly saw a bright light flash on the corner of his eye. He saw the tip of Michael's finger glow white with power. Worry showed on Arseny's face, but he soon realized that this power was not an ability, but just a simple spell made out of mana. This would not affect his diva. How did you defeat Blazel if you don't even know the basics of magnetics? It was at that moment that Michael fired his Unity gun, creating an instantaneous white laser beam that hit Arseny square in the chest. Arseny's eyes widened, not expecting it to be so fast he couldn't even react. But thanks to his top-of-the-line FlareCorp armor, the laser beam slowed down just a few milliseconds, enough for his red flames to manifest and try to conquer the laser beam. However, Arseny's red flames seemed to recoil in pain as it touched the Unity gun beam, with its flames becoming destroyed upon contact. Arseny could only stare in shock as the Unity gun continued on its course and penetrated through his armor and into his body. Kagh! Arseny winced. Blood started to flow from the wound in his chest, despite it being smaller than a fingernail. Red flames manifested around the wound. "Stop bleeding," Arseny said to himself, causing the blood to flow back into his body. Still, he could not reverse the injury. Holding his chest in pain, Arseny looked at Michael, confusion and anger directed at him. A mana spell that could defeat an ability? That's impossible. Michael didn't respond and simply raised his hand again, with the tip of his fingers glowing with the same power as before. Now wary of this strange spell, Arseny dived back into the ground. He swooped down into the forest, slicing trees as his halberd swung by. Each of the trees were cut from the trunk. The sound of wood splintering echoed out as the trees started to fall like dominoes. But then, red flames started to envelop the trees, allowing Arseny to take full control over them. "Attack him!" he shouted, pointing at Michael. There was a sense of urgency in his voice, one that was spurred on by the ominous glowing light on Michael's finger. 20 trees shot towards Michael, each one with its crown pointed at him. Just as one tree was about to hit Michael, a small blur sped forth from his fingers and attached itself to the tree. And suddenly, the tree froze in place, unable to move any further. Arseny's face turned into one of complete shock and horror as he realized that even his red flames stopped moving, as if time itself had ceased to flow.